Power corrupts. But what happens when that power flows from an ancient mystical energy field that binds the galaxy together? The answer is the Sith, a legacy of darkness that would shape galactic history for thousands of years. The story of the Sith begins not with monsters or demons, but with Jedi, the guardians of peace and justice who served the light side of the Force. Around 7,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Jedi Order faced its greatest internal challenge yet. A faction within their ranks grew frustrated with the limitations of Jedi teachings. They wanted more. They craved knowledge the Jedi Council had forbidden. They hungered for power that the light side could never provide. These rebellious Jedi broke away from the Order in what historians call the Second Great Schism. But this was no peaceful separation. The rogue Jedi delved into forbidden dark side practices that horrified their former brothers and sisters. Sith alchemy, genetic mutations, rituals that twisted the very fabric of life itself. They rejected the Jedi code of peace and serenity in favor of passion and strength. Among these fallen Jedi were figures whose names would become legendary in dark side lore. Ajunta Pal, a warrior of tremendous strength and ambition. Carnes Moore, a master of forbidden techniques. Soxan, whose knowledge of the dark side ran deeper than most could comprehend. These dark Jedi believed that conflict was the true path to power, that through struggle, the strongest would rise and the weak would fall away. This philosophical divide erupted into open warfare. What followed was a century of bloodshed known as the 100-Year Darkness. For decades, the Dark Jedi and their loyalists battled against the Jedi Order across countless worlds. The scale of destruction was unlike anything the Republic had witnessed before. The Dark Jedi unleashed terrible creations during this war. They used their twisted alchemy to craft monstrous beasts, living weapons born from their experiments with the dark side. These abominations terrorized Republic worlds and pushed the Jedi to their limits. Despite the horror they inflicted, the Dark Jedi ultimately lost their war. The final confrontation came at the Battle of Korbos around 6,900 years before Yavin. There, the Jedi Order finally defeated the Dark Jedi Rebellion. But rather than execute the fallen Jedi, the Republic chose what they believed was mercy. They stripped the Dark Jedi of their weapons and belongings, loaded them onto unarmed ships, and exiled them from Republic space. This act of mercy would reshape galactic history forever. Cast into the unknown regions of space, these fallen Jedi wandered for weeks until they discovered a remote world called Korriban. What they found there would change everything. Korriban was home to a primitive species called the Sith. These red-skinned humanoids had a natural connection to the dark side of the Force, though they understood it only as magic. The exiled Dark Jedi saw opportunity. They used their powers to awe the native Sith people, presenting themselves as gods. The Sith worshipped these newcomers, and the Dark Jedi seized control of their civilization. Over time, the human Dark Jedi began to intermarry with the Sith species, blending their cultures and knowledge to create something new. The strongest of the exiles, Ajunta Pal, declared himself the first Dark Lord of the Sith. He established the Sith Order as we know it and laid the foundations for an empire built on dark side principles. The fallen Jedi adopted the name of the native species they had conquered. They were no longer Dark Jedi. They were Sith Lords. Under Paul and the other former Jedi, the newly founded Sith Empire established its capital on Korriban, with another major center on the nearby world of Ziost. The early Sith society embraced conflict as a philosophy. They believed that struggle was necessary, that it weeded out weakness and honed strength. This core belief would remain central to Sith thinking for millennia to come. The Sith developed a strict hierarchy with the Dark Lord at its pinnacle. Below him were the Sith Lords, each commanding territories and followers. Competition was encouraged, but open rebellion against the Dark Lord meant death. This constant internal pressure created a society where power was everything and compassion was viewed as weakness. For the next 1,000 years, this fledgling Sith Empire grew in isolation from the Republic. Without the Jedi to oppose them, the Sith expanded their control to nearby star systems. They built massive temples and academies to train new generations in the dark side. Their architecture reflected their values, towering, imposing structures designed to inspire fear and awe. During this period of expansion, several legendary Sith Lords rose to prominence. Among the most feared was Tulak Hord, remembered as a great conqueror who subjugated entire systems. His mastery of lightsaber combat and Sith sorcery was unmatched in his time. Hord extended Sith influence to distant worlds, including Dromund Kaas, which would later become an important refuge for the Sith in darker times. The Sith built a civilization unlike anything seen in the Republic. Their society was steeped in dark side sorcery and ruled absolutely by their Dark Lords. Slavery was common. The strong dominated the weak. Power struggles between ambitious Sith were constant, though usually conducted through manipulation rather than open warfare that might weaken the Empire as a whole. By around 5,100 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Sith Empire reached what historians call the Golden Age of the Sith. This era of unrivaled prosperity and power came under the reign of one remarkable figure, Dark Lord Marka Ragnos. Ragnos was different from many Sith Lords who came before and after him. While incredibly powerful in combat and the dark side, his true genius lay in leadership and manipulation. He maintained his position as Dark Lord for over a century, an almost unheard-of reign in Sith history. The secret to Ragnos' longevity was his understanding of Sith nature. He recognized that ambitious Sith Lords would always seek more power. Rather than try to suppress this ambition, he channeled it. Ragnos would pit potential rivals against each other, ensuring they spent their energy fighting one another instead of challenging him. He rewarded those who succeeded without growing too powerful and ruthlessly eliminated any who threatened his rule. Under Marka Ragnos, the Sith Empire expanded its borders, developed new applications of dark side power, and built tremendous wealth. The native Sith species became increasingly rare as interbreeding with humans continued, but their red skin and facial features remained common genetic traits among the ruling class. For over 100 years, Ragnos maintained this delicate balance of power, but nothing lasts forever. Around 5,000 years before Yavin, Marka Ragnos died. His death created a power vacuum that threatened to undo everything he had built. Two powerful Sith Lords emerged as the primary contenders for his throne. The first was Naga Sadow, an ambitious and forward-thinking Sith who believed the Empire should expand aggressively into new territories. The second was Ludo Kresh, a conservative traditionalist who felt the Empire should consolidate its existing power rather than risk overextension. The funeral of Marka Ragnos became the stage for their rivalry to erupt. As the Sith gathered to entomb their fallen leader, Sado and Kresh arrived with their supporters. What began as verbal sparring quickly escalated. The two Sith Lords drew their lightsabers and dueled before the assembled mourners, each claiming the right to succeed Ragnos. What happened next has become legend. As they fought, witnesses claim the spirit of Marka Ragnos himself appeared before them. The ghostly form of the dead Emperor warned the combatants that their actions threatened everything the Sith had built. He cautioned that while the future held great potential for the Sith, it also contained terrible risks. Then, as suddenly as he had appeared, the spirit vanished. The duel ended without a clear victor, but the succession crisis was far from resolved. The Sith Empire stood at a crossroads. For thousands of years, they had built their power in isolation, unknown to the Republic they had once fled. Their golden age had reached its peak under Ragnos. Now, with his death, the Empire was about to enter a new and dangerous chapter. The peaceful isolation that had allowed the Sith to thrive was about to end. Soon, the Republic would rediscover the existence of the Sith. The stage was set for a conflict that would reshape galactic history once again. Naga Sadow and Ludo Kresh continued their political maneuvering in the aftermath of Ragnos's funeral. Each gathered allies among the Sith Lords, trying to build enough support to claim the throne. The Empire teetered on the edge of civil war, but fate intervened in an unexpected way. Empires rise and fall based on single moments, single decisions that change everything. For the Sith Empire, that moment came when a Republic ship made a wrong turn. The year was 5000 BBY. The Sith Empire stood at its peak after 1,000 years of isolation. Hidden from the galaxy, they had built their strength, perfected their dark arts, and prepared for the day they might return to the stars they once knew. That day arrived when a simple merchant vessel accidentally dropped out of hyperspace in Sith territory. Aboard this ship were the Daragon siblings, Gav and Jory. They were explorers and hyperspace scouts looking for new trade routes. What they found instead was an empire built on darkness, waiting for its moment to strike. The Daragons had no idea they had just triggered a chain of events that would bring two galactic powers into their first catastrophic confrontation. When the Republic ship landed on Korriban, the Sith immediately captured the siblings as potential spies. To most of the Sith leadership, these outsiders represented a threat to be eliminated. But one man saw something different. Naga Sadow, ambitious and hungry for power, recognized an opportunity that could serve his own goals. Sadow was locked in a struggle for control of the Sith Empire with his rival, Ludo Kresh. The unexpected arrival of Republic citizens gave him the perfect tool to seize power. Sadow orchestrated a daring plan. He secretly helped the Daragons escape their prison, then staged an elaborate deception. He made it appear as though Republic forces had mounted a rescue mission, attacking Sith territory in the process. This false flag operation accomplished exactly what Sadow intended. He presented himself as the strong, wartime leader the Sith needed in this moment of crisis. He claimed the Republic clearly knew about the Sith Empire and was preparing for war. The only logical response, he argued, was to strike first and strike hard. Ludo Kresh saw through the manipulation. He recognized Sadao was manufacturing conflict to grab power, but Kresh acted too late. Sadao launched a surprise attack against him, catching his forces unprepared. In the ensuing battle, Kresh appeared to die when his flagship was destroyed. With his primary opponent eliminated, Naga Sato was crowned the new Dark Lord of the Sith with little further resistance. Now in control of the Empire, Sato prepared for war. He allowed Jory Daragon to escape back to Republic space, but placed a tracking device on her ship. When she jumped to hyperspace, Sato could follow her trail directly to the heart of the Republic. The new Dark Lord assembled the greatest armada in Sith history, gathering warriors, ships, and weapons from across the Empire. Sato was no fool. He knew that despite their strength, the Sith forces were likely outnumbered by the Republic military. To compensate, he relied on his greatest power. From aboard a specialized meditation sphere, Sato would use Sith sorcery to create illusions that multiplied the apparent size of his fleet. This battle meditation was a rare and potent ability that could turn the tide of conflict. The Republic had no warning when the Sith Armada emerged from hyperspace. In a coordinated strike, Sith forces attacked dozens of Republic worlds simultaneously. Coruscant, Koros, Kirek, and other key systems came under assault. Republic defenders faced not only physical attacks, but also fear and confusion amplified by Sith alchemy. For the Sith, this was the culmination of 1,000 years of waiting. It was their chance to avenge the humiliation of their ancestors who had been cast out by the Jedi. It was their opportunity to conquer the Republic and claim the galaxy as their own. Initial reports suggested overwhelming Sith success as Republic forces fell back on multiple fronts. But war rarely follows a predictable path. As the conflict spread, two factors began to shift the momentum away from the Sith. First, the Jedi Order rallied. Though they had never faced this enemy before, the Jedi proved adaptable and resourceful. They quickly learned to counter Sith sorcery and developed tactics to neutralize the advantages of their dark side opponents. The second factor came from within the Sith ranks themselves. Gav Daragon, the male explorer captured alongside his sister, had been taken under Naga Sadao's wing. Sadao had been training Gav in Sith techniques, seeing potential in the young man. But as Gav witnessed the brutality of the Sith assault on his home systems, his loyalty wavered. In a pivotal moment that would alter the course of the war, Gav Daragon infiltrated Sadao's meditation sphere. He attacked the Dark Lord directly, breaking his concentration and disrupting the battle meditation that was coordinating the Sith forces. Without Sadao's sorcery maintaining the illusions, Republic defenders suddenly realized many of the Sith ships they faced were mere phantoms. The revelation spread quickly through Republic communications. What had seemed like an unstoppable invasion force was revealed to be much smaller than it appeared. Republic morale surged as they realized the enemy could be beaten. They launched a massive counteroffensive across all fronts. Naga Sadao, recognizing that the tide had turned, ordered a retreat. The Sith Armada pulled back from Republic space, fleeing toward their territory with Republic forces in pursuit. What had begun as a war of conquest had become a desperate fight for survival. When Sadao returned to Sith space with his damaged fleet, he faced yet another shock. Ludo Kresh had survived their earlier battle. While Sado was leading the invasion, Kresh had gathered his supporters and seized control of the Sith homeworlds. As Sado's battered ships arrived in orbit around Korriban, they were met by Kresh's fleet, ready for battle. Civil war erupted at the worst possible moment for the Sith Empire. With Republic forces closing in behind them, the two Sith factions turned their weapons on each other. Ships already damaged from the Republic campaign now faced fire from their own kind. It was the exact scenario Marka Ragnos had warned against when his spirit appeared at his funeral. In the chaos of the orbital battle, Naga Sado managed to destroy Kresh's flagship, seemingly killing his rival once and for all. But the victory was hollow. Before Sado could consolidate his position, Republic warships arrived in the system. The Jedi had tracked the Sith retreat and brought the full might of the Republic military to Korriban itself. Caught between the pursuing Republic and the remnants of Kresh's forces, Sado made a desperate gamble. He ordered his flagship to the nearby Denari binary star system. There, using forbidden Sith techniques, Sado caused one of the stars to go supernova. The resulting explosion wiped out a portion of the pursuing Republic fleet and created enough chaos for Sado to escape. With just a handful of loyal Massassi warriors, Naga Sado fled to the remote moon of Yavin 4. There, in the dense jungles, he went into hiding. The once mighty Dark Lord of the Sith was reduced to a refugee, preserving what little he could of Sith knowledge and waiting for a chance that would never come in his lifetime. Back in Sith space, the Republic showed no mercy. They systematically attacked and destroyed every Sith stronghold they could find. Korriban, Ziost, and other core worlds of the Empire fell one by one. The Jedi were determined to eliminate the Sith threat completely, having seen the danger they posed to the galaxy. The native Sith species, already reduced in numbers due to interbreeding with human Dark Jedi over the centuries, were decimated in the Republic assault. Those who survived scattered to remote worlds or were forced into hiding. The grand temples and academies that had stood for 1,000 years were reduced to rubble or abandoned to the desert sands. By the time the Republic forces withdrew, the Sith Empire that had flourished for a millennium was no more. The year 5000 BBY marked the collapse of the first great Sith civilization. The Republic and the Jedi believed they had eliminated the Sith threat forever. In fact, many historical records from this period refer to the complete extinction of the Sith Order. But the dark side is not so easily extinguished. Unknown to the Republic, one Sith Lord had neither joined Sado's invasion nor fallen in the subsequent Republic assault. His name was Vitiate, a powerful Sith sorcerer. During the chaos of the Great Hyperspace War, Vitiate had remained hidden, watching as the Empire crumbled. When it became clear that the Sith had lost, Vitiate sent out a call to the surviving Sith Lords. He promised them a way to escape the Republic hunters and rebuild their strength. Hundreds of remaining Sith answered his summons, gathering on the planet Nathema. There, Vitiate claimed he would perform a ritual to save them all. It was a deception more terrible than anything Naga Sado had orchestrated. Once the Sith Lords were assembled, Vitiate enacted a ritual of extraordinary scale and horror. He linked all the Sith Lords in a dark side network, then drained their life essence completely. In a single moment, he killed every living being on Nathema. Not just the Sith Lords, but every plant, animal, and microbe. The ritual accomplished two things. First, it granted Vitiate extraordinary power and virtual immortality, sustaining his life for centuries beyond a normal lifespan. Second, it severed the planet's connection to the Force itself, turning Nathema into a void that Force sensitives would instinctively avoid, helping to hide his actions from Jedi detection. With his newfound power, the Sith Lord, now known as Darth Vitiate, gathered the remaining Sith who had not been part of his ritual. Around 4,900 BBY, he led this remnant into the unknown regions of the galaxy, far beyond Republic space. There they settled on Dromund Kaas, a world once conquered by the ancient Sith Lord Tulek horde. On this remote world, shrouded in constant storms, Vitiate began building a new Sith Empire in secret. He proclaimed himself the Sith Emperor and promised his followers that one day they would return to crush the Republic. Unlike the old empire with its constant power struggles, Vitiate established himself as an undisputed and seemingly eternal ruler. For the next 1,500 years, this hidden Sith Empire developed in isolation. They built cities and academies, trained new generations in the dark side, and advanced their technology. All the while, the galaxy at large believed the Sith were extinct, a threat eliminated by the Republic's victory in the Great Hyperspace War. The Jedi eventually forgot the lessons they had learned fighting the Sith. The Republic grew complacent in its dominance of known space. Neither suspected that in the darkness beyond their borders, the ancient enemy was rebuilding, planning, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike back. The Great Hyperspace War had ended with what appeared to be the total destruction of the Sith Empire. But in reality, it had only driven the Sith deeper into the shadows, where darkness thrives best. The legacy of the Sith would endure, preserved by Vitiate and his followers, ready to emerge again when the galaxy least expected it. While the hidden Sith Empire grew stronger in the unknown regions, the legacy of Naga Sadow would also continue to influence the galaxy. On Yavin 4, Sadow and his Masashi followers built temples and conducted dark side experiments. Though Sadow eventually died, the dark power he left behind on the jungle moon would wait dormant for thousands of years, ready to corrupt future generations who discovered its secrets. The collapse of the first Sith Empire in 5000 BBY was not the end of the Sith. It was merely the end of a chapter in their long history. The dark side would find new vessels, new ambitions to feed upon, and new opportunities to challenge the light. The Sith would return again and again, each time learning from the failures of the past. For the legacy of the dark side is not built on stability or peace, but on transformation through destruction. The fall of the Sith Empire was just another step in that endless cycle, and as the Republic celebrated their victory, they remained unaware that the greatest Sith threat was still growing in power, hidden beyond the edges of their maps, biding its time. When darkness seems defeated, it often just goes underground. The Sith Empire had fallen, but its legacy remained, buried like seeds waiting for the right soul to nurture them back to life. That soul belonged to a Jedi Knight named Freeden Nad. After the Great Hyperspace War, the galaxy believed the Sith were finished. For 400 years, the Republic expanded and prospered while the Jedi Order rebuilt its strength. Most assumed the dark teachings of the Sith were lost to history, existing only in heavily restricted archives and whispered warnings to Jedi younglings. They were wrong. In 4400 BBY, Freedon Nad was a talented Jedi Knight with a dangerous hunger for knowledge. Like many who would later fall, Nad grew frustrated with what he saw as limitations in Jedi teaching. The Order preached patience and restraint. Nad wanted power and answers. This discontent festered until he finally abandoned the Jedi path altogether, setting out to find teachings they had forbidden. His search led him to rumors of ancient Sith wisdom. Though the Sith Empire had been destroyed, stories persisted of hidden caches of knowledge scattered across the galaxy. Nad followed these whispers to the jungle moon of Yavin 4, the same refuge where Naga Sadow had fled centuries earlier. There, among crumbling temples overgrown by jungle, Nad made a shocking discovery. Naga Sadow himself still existed, either in suspended animation or as a powerful spirit, depending on which historical accounts you believe. The last Dark Lord of the old Sith Empire had preserved himself through dark side techniques, waiting for someone worthy to continue the Sith legacy. Sadow recognized potential in the fallen Jedi. He took Freedon Nad as his apprentice, teaching him forbidden Sith sorcery and alchemy. For years, Nad absorbed everything the ancient Dark Lord could teach him, growing stronger in the dark side with each passing day. The student learned to extend his life, create terrible weapons, and bend others to his will through Sith magic. But the relationship between Sith master and apprentice always follows the same pattern. Once Nad had learned all he believed Sadow could teach, he turned on his master. In a confrontation that echoed how Sadow himself had once betrayed his own teacher, Freedon Nad destroyed Naga Sadow. The last direct link to the original Sith Empire was gone, but its knowledge had been successfully passed to a new generation. Armed with Sith teachings and artifacts collected from Yavin 4, Nad searched for a world he could rule. He found Onderon, a planet far from Republic oversight. Onderon was still developing, its people living in a single-walled city called Iziz, surrounded by dangerous beasts that roamed the wilderness. It was the perfect laboratory for Sith domination. Freedon Nad conquered Onderon with terrifying ease. Using his Sith powers, he subjugated the population and established himself as both King of Iziz and Dark Lord of the planet. Under his rule, Onderon became a society built on dark side worship. Those who opposed him were cast into the wilderness to be devoured by the beasts. Those who served were rewarded with protection behind the city walls. What made Nad particularly notable in Sith history was the longevity of his reign. Through Sith magic, he extended his life far beyond normal human limits, ruling Onderon for over a century. Generations of Onderonians were born, lived and died, knowing only his dark influence. He reshaped their culture entirely, building a society where strength was valued above all else, and the dark side was worshipped openly. When Freedon Nad finally died, around 4300 BBY, his physical form was entombed beneath the royal palace in Iziz. But death did not end his influence. Nad had grown so powerful in the dark side that his spirit remained, guiding his descendants who continued to rule Onderon. The royal bloodline he established carried both his genetic legacy and his Sith teachings forward. This created something new in galactic history. While the Sith Empire was gone, a cult devoted to Sith teachings now controlled an entire planet. The Nadists, as they came to be known, worshipped Freedon Nad as a god-king and followed his dark side teachings religiously. For centuries, they maintained his traditions, even as the rest of the galaxy forgot the Sith had ever existed. Over time, Onderonian society fractured along lines Nad himself had created. Inside the walls of Iziz, those loyal to the royal family and the Nadist teachings lived in relative comfort. Those who rejected dark side rule were banished to the wilderness, where most were killed by the savage beasts that roamed Onderon. But humans are adaptable. Some of the exiles survived by learning to tame and ride the flying beasts native to Onderon. These beast riders, as they came to be called, developed their own culture in opposition to the dark side worshippers of Iziz. For generations, they waged guerrilla warfare against the city, leading to conflicts known as the Beast Wars. By around 4030 BBY, these Beast Wars had become a constant feature of Onderonian life. The dark side rulers of Iziz, guided by Nad's lingering spirit, fought against the beast riders who sought to overthrow them. This conflict would eventually draw attention from beyond Onderon. In approximately 4000 BBY, the Beast Wars reached their climax. The Jedi Order, finally becoming aware of the dark side presence on Onderon, sent a delegation led by Master Arca Jeth to intervene. The Jedi sought to end the centuries of conflict and purge the dark influence that had corrupted Onderon since Nad's arrival. Queen Amanoa ruled Iziz at this time. A direct descendant of Freedon Nad, she openly channeled his dark powers to maintain control. When the Beast Riders launched a major assault on the city with Jedi support, Amanoa retreated to Nad's tomb, drawing on his spirit to strengthen her dark side abilities. The Battle of Iziz might have ended differently had the Queen's gambit succeeded. But Master Arca Jeth used his considerable light side power to temporarily neutralize Nad's influence. Without the dark side to sustain her, Queen Amanoa perished, and the Beast Riders claimed victory. The Jedi believed they had ended Onderon's long nightmare. They were wrong. King Omin, the elderly husband of Queen Amanoa, had been hiding in the background. Also a Nad descendant, Omin had spent decades studying dark side techniques. While appearing frail and confined to a mechanical life support device, he was secretly communing with Nad's spirit and growing in dark side power. In 3998 BBY, just 2 years after Amanoa's defeat, Omin emerged to lead what history records as the Freedon Nad Uprising. With Nad's spirit guiding him, Omin rallied the remaining Nadist cultists. Their first act shocked the Jedi. Nadist rebels stole Freedon Nad's sarcophagus, which the Jedi had been preparing to relocate off-world. The uprising gained momentum rapidly. When Master Arca Jeth attempted to confront King Omin, the aged Sith disciple revealed his true power. Drawing on Nad's spirit, Omin captured the Jedi Master. The situation became dire enough that additional Jedi, including Ulic and Kekeldroma, were dispatched to Onderon. The Jedi mounted a rescue mission to free Arca Jeth from Omin's stronghold. In the confrontation that followed, they faced both the king and the spirit of Freedon Nad himself. After fierce fighting, the Jedi prevailed. Omin was defeated, and Master Arca Jeth used his considerable power to banish Nad's spirit from Onderon. Freedon Nad, conscious that his influence on Onderon was finally ending, made one final move to preserve Sith knowledge. Before his spirit was banished, he encountered two visitors who had come to Onderon seeking dark side teachings. Satal and Alima Keto were aristocrats from the Empress Teta system, with a hunger for power that reminded Nad of himself in his youth. Nad passed crucial Sith teachings to the Ketos, who managed to escape Onderon with ancient scrolls and artifacts. This seemingly small event would have galaxy-spanning consequences. The Ketos returned to their home system and used their new knowledge to form the Krath cult, a dark side organization that would soon threaten the Republic. Meanwhile, the Jedi took drastic steps to end Onderon's dark side legacy once and for all. They moved Freeden Nad's remains to Onderon's moon, Duxin, believing the dense jungle and isolation would prevent future dark side adherents from accessing his tomb. This decision, made with the best intentions, would prove catastrophic. While the Jedi were dealing with the aftermath on Onderon, a new player was about to enter the stage. Exar Kun was a gifted Jedi Knight whose arrogance was matched only by his natural talent. Like Freeden Nad before him, Kun chafed under Jedi restrictions. He became obsessed with forbidden knowledge, particularly the lost teachings of the Sith. In 3997 BBY, Exar Kun abandoned the Jedi Order to pursue these dark teachings. His journey first took him to Onderon and Duxin, where rumors of Sith artifacts had spread despite Jedi efforts at containment. There, the spirit of Freeden Nad made contact with Kun, recognizing another powerful vessel for Sith knowledge. Under Nad's ghostly guidance, Kun traveled to Korriban, the ancient Sith homeworld. In the tombs of long-dead Sith lords, Kun faced trials that nearly killed him. Crushed under a collapsing ceiling and close to death, he finally surrendered to the dark side in exchange for survival. His injuries healed immediately, but his soul was now open to darkness. Freeden Nad continued to guide the fallen Jedi, leading him next to Yavin 4, where Naga Sadow had once hidden. There, among the temples Sadow had built, Nad hoped to complete Kun's transformation and make him a proper Sith apprentice. But Exar Kun proved even more ambitious and powerful than Nad had anticipated. After learning all he could from Nad's spirit, Kun turned against his teacher. In a display of tremendous dark side power, Exar Kun destroyed Freeden Nad's spirit completely. Just as Nad had once destroyed Naga Sadow, the cycle of Sith betrayal continued. With Nad gone, Kun declared himself the new Dark Lord of the Sith and began building what he called the Brotherhood of the Sith in 3997 BBY. On the other side of the galaxy, the Krath cult that Freeden Nad had inadvertently spawned was growing in power. Satal and Alima Keto used their Sith knowledge to stage a bloody coup in the Empress Teta system. They killed the ruling nobility and established a dark side regime that quickly drew Jedi attention. Concerned about this new threat, the Jedi sent knights to investigate, including Ulic Qel-Droma. Ulic devised a daring but dangerous plan. He would infiltrate the Krath, pretending to have fallen to the dark side, to destroy them from within. The Jedi Council opposed this strategy, but Ulic was determined. His plan backfired spectacularly. Once inside the Krath, Ulic was injected with Sith poison that clouded his judgment. Alima Keto, both beautiful and deadly, seduced him. Between the poison and Alima's influence, Ulic genuinely fell to the dark side, forgetting his Jedi mission and embracing the power the Krath offered. By 3996 BBY, the disparate dark side factions were about to unite. Exar Kun, sensing another powerful Force user embracing the dark side, sought out Ulic Qel-Droma. Their first meeting was a battle, as each tested the other's strength. When they fought to a standstill, ancient Sith spirits appeared to them both, declaring they were destined to rule together. Exar Kun took Ulic as his Sith apprentice, marking him with a Sith tattoo on his forehead. Together they formed an alliance that included the Krath cult, and remarkably, even the Mandalorian warriors led by Mandalore the Indomitable. This combined force launched what history records as the Great Sith War, though some records call it the Exar Kun War. This conflict was the most serious threat the Republic had faced since the Great Hyperspace War 500 years earlier. Kun and Qel-Droma coordinated attacks across multiple fronts, specifically targeting the Jedi Order. They raided the great Jedi library world of Ossus, stealing artifacts and knowledge. Perhaps most alarmingly, Exar Kun traveled to the Jedi Temple on Coruscant and spoke to the gathered Jedi apprentices. Using his charisma and power, he persuaded many young Jedi to join his brotherhood. Those who resisted, he killed. Those who followed him returned to their masters and slew them in their sleep, dealing the Jedi Order a terrible blow from within. At the height of the war, Kun committed an act that showed how far he would go for power. He infiltrated the Republic Senate building on Coruscant and used Sith sorcery to assassinate the Supreme Chancellor during a full session of Congress. The resulting chaos paralyzed Republic response efforts at a critical moment. For a time, it seemed the Sith might actually succeed where Naga Sadow had failed. But as with many Sith endeavors, internal fractures appeared. During a battle on Ossus, as Jedi were evacuating their ancient library world, Ulic Qel-Droma faced his brother Kay in lightsaber combat. Though Kay only sought to reason with his fallen brother, Ulic struck him down in anger. The moment of fratricide broke something in Ulic. The shock of killing his own brother momentarily cleared his mind of dark side influence. In that moment of clarity, Jedi Knight Nomi Sunrider used her unique abilities to cut Ulic off from the Force entirely, rendering him powerless. Captured and faced with the reality of what he had done, Ulic Qel-Droma turned away from the dark side. Though he could no longer feel the Force, he sought redemption by helping the Jedi. He revealed the location of Exar Kun's base on Yavin 4, giving the Republic a chance to end the war. With the Republic forces closing in, Exar Kun knew his physical defeat was imminent, but he had no intention of truly dying. In a terrible ritual, Kun gathered the native Massassi people of Yavin 4, beings descended from ancient Sith experiments. He sacrificed them all, channeling their life energy to separate his spirit from his body. As a massive Jedi force arrived at Yavin 4, they felt the dark ritual in progress. Led by Nomi Sunrider, the Jedi created what they called a wall of light, combining their powers to contain and counteract Kun's dark side energy. The collision of light and dark energies created a firestorm that swept across the moon's surface. The Jedi believed they had destroyed Exar Kun completely. In reality, his spirit had been trapped within the temples of Yavin 4, neither fully alive nor truly dead. There he would remain dormant for thousands of years, until a future generation of Jedi unwittingly awakened him. By the end of 3996 BBY, the Great Sith War had ended. Exar Kun's Brotherhood of the Sith was destroyed. Ulic Qel-Droma, now severed from the Force, wandered the galaxy as a broken man seeking atonement. The Krath cult lost its leadership and splintered into insignificance. The Mandalorians retreated to lick their wounds. The Republic had survived, but at tremendous cost. Billions had died in the conflict. Planets had been ravaged. The Jedi Order had suffered losses not seen in generations, both from battle casualties and from the apprentices Kun had turned against their masters. Perhaps most significantly, the great Jedi library world of Ossus had been devastated. When a nearby star was induced to go supernova by Sith tactics, the Jedi had only hours to evacuate thousands of years of accumulated knowledge. Much was saved, but even more was lost forever. As the smoke cleared, the galaxy once again believed the Sith threat was finally over. Exar Kun was defeated. The Brotherhood was disbanded. The last person to carry Frida Nad's teachings was gone. Surely this time the Sith were truly finished. They were wrong again. The Great Sith War had weakened the Republic and the Jedi in ways that would not be apparent for decades. And in the aftermath of such devastation, new threats would emerge from unexpected quarters. The cycle of the Sith finding new vessels for their dark knowledge would continue. The legacy that began with those first dark Jedi exiles thousands of years earlier would find new expression in the coming conflicts. The Sith always find a way to survive, and the next chapter in their eternal struggle against the light was already taking shape in the shadows. Heroes can fall farther than villains ever rise. In the aftermath of the Great Sith War, the galaxy would learn this lesson through one man whose name would become synonymous with both salvation and destruction: Revan. The defeat of Exar Kun in 3996 BBY left deep scars across the Republic. Worlds lay in ruins. The Jedi Order had lost many of its brightest minds. The Senate struggled to maintain unity among systems questioning the Republic's ability to protect them. This weakness created a vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. Around 3976 BBY, 20 years after Kun's defeat, that vacuum was filled by an old threat returning in a new form. The Mandalorians, a warrior culture whose fighters had allied with Exar Kun, launched a massive invasion of Republic space. But this was no mere raid. This was a systematic campaign of conquest targeting vulnerable systems along the Outer Rim. The Mandalorian Wars began as border skirmishes, but quickly escalated. Under the leadership of a warrior called Mandalore the Ultimate, these armored conquerors overwhelmed planetary defenses with brutal efficiency. World after world fell to their advancing forces. Millions died. Millions more became refugees. Despite the growing crisis, the Jedi Council hesitated to act. Still recovering from the devastation of the Great Sith War, the Council feared another conflict might destroy what remained of their order. They counseled patience, suggesting the Republic military should handle the threat while they meditated on the deeper currents within the Force. This caution infuriated many younger Jedi who watched helplessly as systems burned. Among them was a charismatic and talented Jedi Knight named Revan. Alongside his close friend Alec, later known as Malak, Revan argued passionately that the Jedi had a duty to defend the innocent, regardless of the Council's concerns. When the Council maintained their position of non-intervention, Revan made a fateful choice. He would go to war anyway. Gathering like-minded Jedi who shared his convictions, Revan formed a splinter group that came to be called the Revanchists. after their leader. These Jedi volunteers joined Republic military forces on the front lines, directly defying the Council's orders. Under Revan's leadership, the tide of war slowly began to turn. He proved to be a military genius, developing strategies that neutralized Mandalorian advantages and exploited their cultural obsession with direct confrontation. Revan studied Mandalorian tactics, then twisted them against their creators. He was willing to sacrifice individual battles to win the larger campaign, making hard choices that others could not. As the war progressed, Revan changed. The idealistic Jedi who had set out to save the Republic became harder, colder, more calculating. He began wearing a distinctive mask, never showing his face in public. Some say this was to present an unchanging symbol to both his followers and enemies. Others believe it marked the beginning of his transformation into something other than a Jedi. The war reached its climax in 3960 BBY at Malachor 5, a planet on the edge of known space. Revan lured the main Mandalorian fleet to this world, then sprung a trap of devastating proportions. He activated a superweapon called the Mass Shadow Generator, which created a gravity anomaly so powerful it crushed both the Mandalorian fleet and a significant portion of the Republic forces deliberately left behind as a sacrifice. The Battle of Malachor 5 broke the Mandalorians completely. Revan personally defeated Mandalore the Ultimate in single combat, claiming his mask as a trophy. The surviving Mandalorians surrendered, their culture shattered by the totality of their defeat. The Republic celebrated Revan as a hero, the savior who had done what the Jedi Council would not. But the victory came at a terrible price, especially for Revan himself. Unknown to most, Malachor 5 held secrets far more dangerous than any Mandalorian weapon. After the battle, Revan discovered the planet housed the Atreus Academy, an ancient Sith installation dating back to the Old Empire. Within its halls, Revan found teachings and artifacts that called to something growing inside him. The war had already pushed Revan toward pragmatism over principle, toward victory at any cost. Now, surrounded by Sith knowledge and still processing the trauma of a brutal campaign, Revan took his final steps toward the dark side. The hero who had saved the Republic was about to become its greatest threat. After Malachor, Revan and Malak told the Republic they were pursuing fleeing Mandalorian forces into the unknown regions. This was a half-truth. Their real mission was to investigate rumors of a hidden Sith empire lurking beyond known space. The Atreus Academy had contained hints of this threat, and Revan was determined to find it. In the darkness of uncharted space, Revan and Malak made a shocking discovery. They found the empire built by Darth Vitiate, the Sith Lord who had led survivors from the Great Hyperspace War into exile centuries earlier. This empire had been growing in secret on Dromund Kaas, preparing for eventual revenge against the Republic. When Revan and Malak encountered Emperor Vitiate, they were no match for his power. The ancient Sith Lord dominated their minds, bending the two Jedi to his will. He sent them back to Republic space on a mission to find an ancient alien superweapon called the Starforge, which could fuel his planned invasion. Revan and Malak dutifully tracked down the Starforge, an immense space station created by the long-extinct Rakata species. The station drew energy directly from a nearby star, using it to create an endless supply of ships, droids, and weapons. It was the perfect tool for conquest, but it came with a terrible price. The Starforge was infused with dark side energy that corrupted anyone who used it. What happened next remains debated by historians. Some believe Revan and Malak broke free of Vitia's control, but were corrupted by the Star Forge itself. Others suggest Revan had already fallen to the dark side and simply seized the Star Forge for his own ambitions. Whatever the truth, around 3959 BBY, Revan declared himself the new Dark Lord of the Sith, with Malak as his apprentice. They claimed the ancient Sith titles of Darth Revan and Darth Malak. Using the Star Forge's unlimited production capability, they built a massive armada. With this fleet, augmented by fallen Jedi who had followed Revan during the Mandalorian Wars, and Republic officers loyal to their former general, they established a new Sith Empire. Unlike the ancient Sith who had attacked from outside, Revan's Neo-Sith Empire struck from within. The Jedi Civil War, as it came to be known, began around 3958 BBY. For the Republic, still recovering from the Mandalorian Wars, this new conflict was particularly devastating. Their greatest hero had become their greatest enemy. Using intimate knowledge of Republic defenses against them, entire systems that had just begun rebuilding from the Mandalorian Wars found themselves once again in the path of destruction. Revan's military genius, which had once saved the Republic, now threatened to destroy it. He specifically targeted strategic systems, manufacturing centers, and key hyperspace routes. The war was characterized by precision rather than wholesale destruction. Revan wanted to conquer the Republic, not obliterate it. For the Jedi Order, the Civil War was a nightmare beyond imagination. Many of their own had turned against them, including some of their most talented knights. The Order, already weakened by the Great Sith War and the Mandalorian conflicts, found itself fighting former friends and students. Some Jedi fell in battle. Others were turned to the dark side through persuasion or torture. The Order seemed on the brink of collapse. Then, in 3957 BBY, an unexpected development changed everything. During a Jedi ambush on Revan's flagship, Darth Malak saw an opportunity. Instead of helping his master repel the Jedi attackers, Malak ordered his own ship to fire on Revan's bridge. It was the classic Sith betrayal. Apprentice turning against master, but with galaxy-altering consequences. The attack left Revan critically injured and unconscious. The Jedi strike team, led by a talented young Jedi named Bastila Shan, managed to escape with Revan's broken body just before his flagship was destroyed. Malak, believing his master dead, immediately claimed the title of Dark Lord of the Sith for himself and took control of the Sith Armada. What happened next was one of the most controversial decisions in Jedi history. Rather than allowing Revan to die or standing him trial for his crimes, the Jedi Council chose a different path. They used the Force to heal Revan's shattered mind, but in the process erased his memories. They gave him a new identity as a loyal Republic soldier, hoping to use his innate connection to the Force and knowledge of Sith plans against Malak. Darth Malak continued the war against the Republic, but lacked his former master's strategic brilliance. Where Revan had been surgical and calculated, Malak was brutal and direct. He ordered entire planets bombarded from orbit if they resisted Sith rule. His approach may have been less efficient than Revan's, but it spread terror throughout Republic space. In 3956 BBY, the amnesiac Revan, unaware of his true identity, became involved in the search for the Star Forge alongside Bastila Shan and other companions. Through their journey, Revan gradually recovered fragments of his lost memories and rediscovered his power in the Force. Eventually, the truth of his identity was revealed, forcing Revan to confront the legacy of his actions as Dark Lord. In a moment that would define galactic history, Revan rejected his Sith past. Whether due to the Jedi's memory manipulation or a genuine change of heart, Revan chose to fight against the Empire he had created. He led a Republic mission to the Starforge itself, culminating in a final confrontation with his former apprentice. The duel between Revan and Malak aboard the Starforge was the stuff of legend. Former master versus former apprentice, both wielding tremendous power. In the end, Revan proved the stronger. Darth Malak fell, and with his dying words acknowledged that perhaps Revan had made the wiser choice in returning to the light. With Revan's help, Republic forces destroyed the Starforge in the Battle of Rakata Prime. Without the space station's endless supply of ships and weapons, and with its leadership decapitated, the Sith Empire quickly began to crumble. By the end of 3956 BBY, the Jedi Civil War was effectively over, with the Republic victorious but severely weakened by years of conflict. During this period, the title Darth became firmly established as the honorific used by Sith Lords. While the title had ancient origins, Revan and Malak popularized its usage in the modern era, creating a tradition that would continue through all subsequent generations of Sith. The end of the war did not bring peace, however. With Malak dead and Revan returned to the light, the remaining Sith forces fell into disarray. Ambitious Sith Lords and Dark Jedi who had served under Revan and Malak now fought each other for supremacy. This Sith Civil War raged across former Sith territories, adding to the chaos and suffering of worlds already devastated by years of conflict. By 3955 BBY, this infighting had virtually wiped out many of the former Sith leaders. They destroyed each other with the same ruthlessness they had once directed at the Republic. It seemed as though the Sith might finally eliminate themselves through their own inherent tendency toward betrayal and power struggles. But from the ashes of this self-destruction, a new and more insidious Sith leadership emerged. 3 powerful Sith Lords who had been operating in the shadows during the later stages of the Civil War stepped forward to unite the surviving Sith under their rule. Together, they formed what history would call the Sith Triumvirate. The first was Darth Traya, once known as Kriya, who had been Revan's Jedi Master before his fall. Her specialty was manipulation and strategy, seeing connections in the Force that others missed. The second was Darth Nihilus, a being of pure hunger who had survived Malachor V only by becoming something barely human, a wound in the Force that consumed life energy. The third was Darth Sion, called the Lord of Pain, who had used hatred and the dark side to keep his shattered body intact, achieving a form of painful immortality. These 3 established their headquarters at the Trayus Academy on Malachor V, the same place where Revan had first found Sith teachings years earlier. From this hidden base, they developed a plan not merely to defeat the Republic, but to destroy the Jedi Order completely. Their approach was subtle and terrifying. Rather than engaging in open warfare like their predecessors, the Triumvirate waged a shadow campaign of assassination and subversion. From 3954 to 3951 BBY, they orchestrated what became known as the First Jedi Purge, systematically hunting down and eliminating Jedi throughout the galaxy. Darth Nihilus played a particularly devastating role in this purge. His unique ability to drain Force energy on a massive scale made him a living weapon against Jedi. The most notorious example came when Nihilus attacked the planet Qatar, where the Jedi had gathered for a conclave to discuss the growing threat. In a single moment of terrible power, Nihilus drained the life from the entire planet, killing all the Jedi present and every other living being on Qatar. While Nihilus hunted Jedi openly, Darth Sion tracked down survivors one by one, his broken body unable to die, giving him a relentless persistence that exhausted even the most capable Jedi Masters. Meanwhile, Traya worked from the shadows, manipulating events and setting elaborate traps to draw out any Jedi in hiding. The Jedi Order, already weakened by decades of continuous warfare, was pushed to the brink of extinction. Those who weren't killed went into hiding, severing their connection to the Force or fleeing to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. By 3952 BBY, the Order that had stood for thousands of years was reduced to a handful of survivors in hiding. In this darkest hour, an unlikely hero emerged. Meetra Surik, known in records as the Jedi Exile, had fought under Revan during the Mandalorian Wars. She had been present at Malachor V and had given the order to activate the mass shadow generator. The trauma of feeling thousands of deaths through the Force had caused her to unconsciously sever her own connection to it. Stripped of her powers and exiled by the Jedi Council for following Revan to war, Surik had spent years wandering the Outer Rim. In 3951 BBY, she returned to Republic space, gradually reconnecting with the Force. Her unique wound in the Force made her invisible to the Sith Triumvirate's detection, allowing her to move through the galaxy when other Jedi could not. Guided in part by Kreia, whose true identity as Darth Traya remained hidden for much of their journey, Surik began tracking down surviving Jedi Masters. Her goal was to unite them against the new Sith threat, but she discovered that many were unwilling to fight or had lost faith in the Jedi path altogether. As Surik's power grew, she attracted companions and rebuilt her connection to the Force. She displayed a rare ability to form Force bonds with others, drawing strength from these connections. This power would prove crucial in the coming confrontation with the Triumvirate. The final phase of the conflict began when Kreia revealed herself as Darth Traya, and the true nature of her plans became clear. She had been using Surik not simply to destroy the Sith, but as part of a larger scheme to potentially destroy the Force itself, which she had come to see as a manipulative influence on all life. Surik was forced to confront each member of the Triumvirate in turn. First came Darth Nihilus, whose attack on the planet Telos was thwarted when Surik exploited his hunger against him. The confrontation ended with Nihilus destroyed, his mask the only remnant of his existence. Next was Darth Sion on Korriban, the ancient Sith homeworld. Rather than defeating him through pure combat, Surik convinced the Lord of Pain to let go of his hatred and allow himself to truly die. It was a victory of persuasion rather than violence, showing Surik's growth beyond a mere warrior. Finally, Surik returned to Malachor V to confront Darth Traya at the Trayos Academy. Their final battle was as much philosophical as physical, with Traya testing Surik's understanding of the Force and the nature of her choices. In the end, Surik prevailed, defeating her former mentor and ending the Triumvirate's threat. With the battle won, Surik activated the repaired mass shadow generator one final time, destroying Malachor V and the Trayos Academy completely. This act erased the primary nexus of Sith power that had corrupted so many, from Revan to the Triumvirate. By around 3950 BBY, the First Jedi Purge had ended. The Sith Triumvirate was destroyed, and the surviving Sith followers scattered or went into hiding. Mitra Surik began the process of rebuilding the Jedi Order with a handful of Force sensitives she had trained during her journey. From the Sith perspective, this period represented a series of critical failures. The empires built by Revan and the Triumvirate had both collapsed. The legacy that stretched back to Exar Kun, Freeden Nad, and ultimately the ancient Sith seemed finally broken. For approximately 3 centuries following these events, the galaxy would experience a period without any major Sith presence. Yet even this defeat contained seeds of future darkness. The knowledge of the Sith was scattered but not destroyed. The lesson of the Triumvirate's Shadow War would be remembered by future dark side users. And somewhere in the unknown regions, the true Sith Empire under Vitiate continued to grow in strength, waiting for the right moment to emerge from the shadows once more. The cycle of the Sith, it seemed, could be interrupted but never truly broken. For now, the galaxy would enjoy a respite from their darkness. But as history had shown time and again, the Sith always found a way to return. Patience is the greatest weapon. For nearly 3 centuries after the defeat of the Sith Triumvirate, the galaxy enjoyed relative peace. The Republic rebuilt, the Jedi Order recovered its strength, and most believed the Sith were finally gone for good. Far beyond the edges of Republic space, in the darkness of the unknown regions, the true Sith Empire had been waiting. Not scattered cultists or fallen Jedi playing at being Sith, but the direct descendants of those who had fled after the Great Hyperspace War 13 centuries earlier. Under the seemingly immortal Emperor Vitiate, they had built something terrible in the shadows. For over 1,300 years, the Sith Empire that Vitiate led had been growing stronger on Dromund Kaas. Generation after generation of Sith were born, trained, and died, believing in one goal: revenge against the Republic that had driven their ancestors into exile. Revenge against the Jedi who had nearly wiped out their kind. The hatred of an entire civilization, carefully nurtured for more than a millennium. While Exar Kun, Freeden Nad, and even Revan had made their own attempts to revive Sith power, they were merely pale imitations of the true Empire waiting in the darkness. Vitiate knew this. He watched these pretenders rise and fall from afar, content to let them exhaust themselves while his own forces grew stronger. The Emperor took the long view. What was a century or two when planning revenge on a galactic scale? In 3681 BBY, the waiting ended. Without warning, the Sith Empire burst from the unknown regions in a massive invasion force that caught the Republic completely by surprise. Ships of unfamiliar design suddenly appeared over multiple Republic worlds simultaneously. Armies of Sith warriors and their Imperial troops descended on unprepared populations. The Great Galactic War had begun. Leading the charge were Sith Lords whose names would soon inspire terror throughout Republic space. Among them was Darth Malgus, a tactical genius whose battle prowess was matched only by his strategic mind. The Sith offensive was not random. It targeted systems with strategic value, military installations, and hyperspace lanes that would cripple Republic response capabilities. One of their first moves was to reclaim Korriban, the ancient homeworld of the Sith. This was as much symbolic as tactical. By re-establishing control over their ancestral home, the Sith declared to the galaxy that they were not some new threat, but the rightful heirs to a legacy that stretched back thousands of years. For the Republic, the sudden emergence of this unknown enemy was catastrophic. They had grown complacent during centuries of peace. Military readiness had declined. Defense systems had been neglected. The Jedi, while recovered from the purge of centuries past, were unprepared for the sheer number and power of trained Sith warriors suddenly arrayed against them. The war that followed would last nearly 3 decades, with the Sith winning victory after victory in the early years. The Republic struggled to mount an effective defense against an enemy that seemed to know their weaknesses intimately. Billions died as worlds fell to the Sith advance. The Republic's territory shrank as the Empire pushed toward the core worlds. What made this invasion different from previous Sith threats was its organization. This was not a cult or a splinter group, but a fully functioning empire with its own society, military hierarchy, and governmental structures. The Sith troops were disciplined, their strategies coordinated. Behind it all was Emperor Vitiate, directing the war effort from his throne on Dromund Kaas, rarely seen even by his own followers. By the midpoint of the war, Republic morale was crumbling. The Jedi fought valiantly but were outnumbered by the Sith Lords and their acolytes. The Senate bickered over resources and priorities while frontline worlds burned. It seemed only a matter of time before the Republic would collapse entirely under the relentless Sith assault. Then came the moment that would change everything. In 3650 BBY, after decades of grinding warfare, the Sith proposed peace negotiations. The Republic, exhausted by the conflict, eagerly accepted what seemed like an unexpected olive branch. Representatives from both sides gathered on Alderaan to discuss terms, with the Republic hoping to finally end the bloodshed. It was a trap. While the Republic's attention was focused on the peace conference, Darth Malgus led a daring strike force directly to Coruscant, the heart of the Republic. A small fleet of Sith ships dropped out of hyperspace and deployed assault teams to the surface. Their target was the Jedi Temple itself. Malgus personally led the attack on the temple, cutting down Jedi defenders as his forces swarmed through the sacred halls. The Sith planted charges throughout the structure while engaging in brutal combat with the Jedi caught unprepared. When the charges detonated, the temple spires that had stood for millennia crumbled. The seat of Jedi power was left in ruins. Simultaneously, other Sith forces seized control of the Senate building and key defensive installations. They effectively held the entire planet hostage. This event, known as the Sacking of Coruscant, stands as one of the most audacious military operations in galactic history. With their capital captured and their leadership in disarray, the Republic had no choice but to accept the Sith's terms. The Treaty of Coruscant, signed in 3653 BBY, forced the Republic to cede control of numerous star systems to the Sith Empire and recognize it as a legitimate galactic power. From the Sith perspective, this was their moment of triumph. After 13 centuries of waiting, they had succeeded where Naga Sadow had failed. They held half the galaxy and had humiliated their ancient enemies on their own throne world. The signing of the treaty marked the official end of the Great Galactic War, but true peace was never really an option. What followed was a period historians call the Cold War, an uneasy decade where open hostilities ceased. But both sides continued to maneuver against each other through proxies, espionage, and limited engagements that never quite violated the letter of the treaty. During this period, the Sith Empire consolidated their gains. They established governmental structures on conquered worlds, built monuments to their victory, and continued to train new generations of Sith. For many citizens in occupied territories, daily life under Sith rule proved surprisingly orderly, if harsh. The Empire valued strength and loyalty, punishing dissent severely, but allowing those who accepted their place to live and work within the new system. Behind the scenes, Sith politics remained as deadly as ever. Despite their united front against the Republic, the Sith Lords constantly schemed against one another for position and favor. The Sith Code encouraged personal ambition and power struggles, even as it demanded loyalty to the Emperor. This tension created a complex web of alliances and betrayals within the highest ranks of the Empire. Emperor Vitiate himself remained an enigmatic figure during this period. Few even among the Sith Lords ever saw him in person. His power was unquestioned, his lifespan seemingly endless, his true goals known only to himself. While the Sith celebrated their victory over the Republic, some began to wonder what their immortal Emperor truly wanted beyond conquest. For the Republic, the Cold War offered a chance to rebuild. They restructured their military, strengthened their defenses, and prepared for the inevitable resumption of hostilities. The Jedi, devastated by the loss of their temple and many of their members, established new training facilities and recommitted themselves to defending the Republic. As tensions rose, small-scale conflicts erupted along the borders between Republic and Imperial space. Special forces from both sides carried out missions that maintained the fiction of peace while actually continuing the war by other means. Everyone knew a return to open warfare was just a matter of time. The time came when covert operations and proxy conflicts eventually escalated beyond what the treaty could contain. The Cold War gave way to what became known simply as the Galactic War, a renewed period of open hostilities with both sides now better prepared for the fight. During this phase of the conflict, something unexpected occurred. According to some historical accounts, the legendary Jedi Revan, who had vanished centuries earlier after defeating Darth Malak, somehow returned from exile. The details remain murky, with different versions of the story contradicting each other. Some claim Revan had been held prisoner by the Emperor for 300 years. Others suggest it was merely his spirit or a Force echo of his presence. Whatever the truth, records indicate that Revan attempted to confront Emperor Vitiate directly. Though he failed to defeat the Emperor, legends say Revan managed to influence Vitiate telepathically, delaying or disrupting whatever grand plan the immortal Sith had been nurturing for centuries. This intervention may have saved countless lives, though few would ever know of it. The renewed Galactic War saw fortunes shift back and forth. The Sith Empire initially pressed its advantage, capturing more territory and inflicting serious losses on Republic forces. But the Republic had learned from its earlier defeats. Their military was now better trained to face Sith tactics, and the Jedi had adapted their techniques to counter dark side abilities. Slowly, the Republic began to push back, reclaiming lost worlds and breaking the aura of Sith invincibility. Then, around 3630 BBY, the conflict took a bizarre turn that nobody could have predicted. A third faction suddenly emerged to threaten both the Republic and the Sith Empire. This was the eternal empire of Zakuul, led by an emperor called Valkorion. What made this development truly shocking was the eventual revelation that Valkorion was actually another manifestation of Vitiate himself. The full truth of this situation remains one of the great mysteries of Sith history. Somehow, Emperor Vitiate had created or transferred his consciousness to this separate identity, building an entirely different empire in secret while still ruling the Sith. His motivations for this deception remain unclear. Was it a backup plan, a way to play both sides against each other, or something more complex related to his pursuit of true immortality? Whatever his reasons, the emergence of the Eternal Empire forced an unthinkable development. The Sith Empire and the Republic, enemies for millennia, found themselves briefly allied against this common threat. Out of necessity, Sith Lords fought alongside Jedi Knights to repel Zakuul's forces. It was an alliance of convenience that neither side trusted, but both recognized as temporarily necessary for survival. The campaigns against the Eternal Empire weakened both the Republic and the Sith substantially. Fleets were decimated, worlds devastated, resources depleted in the struggle against Valkorion's seemingly endless armies and his elite knights of Zakuul. Eventually, through the efforts of a coalition known as the Alliance, Valkorion was defeated and the Eternal Empire dismantled. In the aftermath, the temporary cooperation between Republic and Sith collapsed. The war between them resumed, but with both sides significantly diminished. It was during these tumultuous years that Emperor Vitiate, in all his forms and manifestations, finally met his end. The nearly immortal Sith who had orchestrated events from the shadows for over 1,000 years was destroyed once and for all. Some accounts attribute this victory to the Knights of the Eternal Throne, others to the spirit of Revan finally completing the mission he had begun centuries earlier. The exact details remain contested among historians. What is clear is that with Vitiate gone, the Sith Empire faced a leadership crisis unlike any in its history. Into this vacuum stepped various powerful Sith Lords, each claiming the right to rule. Among them was Darth Malgus, the military genius who had led the sacking of Coruscant decades earlier. Malgus attempted to claim the throne for himself, proposing reforms to the Empire's structure and policies. He was a formidable leader with significant military support and initially brought some stability to the fragmented empire. But true to the nature of the Sith, unity proved impossible to maintain without the overarching authority of Vitiate. Rival Darths challenged Malgus and each other, leading to internal conflicts that weakened the Empire just as it faced renewed Republic pressure on its borders. The infighting became so severe that some Sith worlds suffered more damage from internal power struggles than from Republic attacks. By roughly 3,600 BBY, the once resurgent Sith Empire had begun to fade as a galactic power. Its territory shrank as the Republic reclaimed lost systems. Many Sith turned on each other rather than face their common enemy. Without the unifying presence of the Emperor, the inherent contradiction of Sith philosophy became apparent. An order built on individual power and ambition could not maintain the cohesion needed for an empire to function. This period marked the end of the last true Sith Empire. Though individual Sith Lords and their followers would continue to exist, the dream of a galaxy-spanning Sith civilization effectively died with Vitiate. The Republic gradually reasserted control over much of the territory it had lost, and the Jedi Order rebuilt once again. In the centuries that followed, From approximately 3,500 to 2,000 BBY, the galaxy entered a long period with no centralized Sith power. This did not mean the dark side was gone, merely fragmented. The legacy of the Sith persisted in isolated pockets throughout the galaxy, carried on by individuals and small groups rather than a unified empire. During this period, Sith warlords and cultists periodically emerged to threaten local systems or regions. Figures like Darth Revan established footholds on worlds like Almas, building fortresses and gathering followers. Secretive sects preserved ancient Sith teachings on planets like Malachor, waiting for someone worthy to claim them. These were serious threats to the worlds they touched, but lacked the resources or coordination to challenge the Republic on a galactic scale. The Jedi Order and Republic military routinely dealt with these isolated Sith uprisings as they appeared, preventing any from growing too powerful. It became something of a cycle. A fallen Jedi or dark side adept would discover Sith teachings, gather followers, establish a power base, threaten a sector or system, and eventually be defeated by Jedi intervention. Yet this period also saw the development of diverse and sometimes surprising Sith traditions. Not all followed the path of conquest and destruction. For example, historical records mention Darth Vectivus. Unlike most of his kind, Vectivus reportedly led a relatively benign existence, building wealth through business rather than military conquest, and even maintaining a family and friendships. He mastered the dark side without being consumed by it, demonstrating a path few Sith had managed to walk. These diverse approaches to the dark side represented an evolution of Sith thinking. Without a central authority dictating doctrine, individual Sith were free to interpret the ancient teachings in new ways. Some remained true to the path of conquest and domination. Others explored more subtle applications of dark side power. All maintained the core Sith belief in passion and personal power, but expressed it through different means. By around 2000 BBY, however, this period of fragmented Sith influence was drawing to a close. A Jedi Knight named Sidious abandoned the Order and took the name Darth Ruin. Unlike the isolated Sith who had come before him, Ruin had grander ambitions. He began gathering followers for what would become the next great resurgence of Sith power and the beginning of a new era of galaxy-spanning conflict. The 1,000-year cycle of the Sith was turning once again. From the ashes of Vitiate's fallen empire, a new Sith Order would rise to challenge the Republic and the Jedi. The darkness that had receded was preparing to advance once more, continuing the eternal struggle between the light and dark sides of the Force. 1,000 years of darkness. That's not hyperbole or dramatics. It's history. The longest continuous conflict the galaxy has ever known began 2,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, when a single fallen Jedi unleashed chaos that would consume an entire millennium. His name was Sidious. Once a respected Jedi Master, his fall to darkness would reshape galactic civilization in ways that make other Sith Lords seem like minor footnotes in comparison. Abandoning the Jedi Order, Sidious took a new name that embodied his intentions: Darth Ruin. What made Ruin different from the scattered Sith who had come before him was his ability to unify. He didn't just turn to the dark side himself. He actively recruited others, particularly Jedi dissatisfied with the Order's restrictions. His charisma and philosophical arguments proved dangerously effective. Dozens of Jedi abandoned their oaths to follow him. These fallen Jedi, combined with dark side adepts and Force sensitives' ruin discovered throughout the galaxy, formed the foundation of what he proudly called the New Sith Order. 2,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, Darth Ruin's movement exploded across the stars. More than a cult or a militant group, this was a full-blown revolution against both the Jedi and the Republic. Systems that had harbored resentment toward Republic governance found in the Sith an alternative path to power. Ambitious individuals who had been denied opportunities under Jedi oversight saw in Ruin's philosophy a chance to seize what they desired. The conflict that followed would be known by many names over the centuries: the New Sith Wars, the Republic Dark Age, the Jedi Sith War. But regardless of what historians called it, the reality was the same. A galaxy plunged into a millennium of conflict that would test the very foundations of civilization. The early centuries of this 1,000-year war saw the Republic rocked back on its heels. The new Sith Empire, as Ruin's successors grandly called their territory, inflicted devastating losses on Republic worlds. They attacked with a ferocity that shocked even veteran Jedi. Planets that had known only peace for generations suddenly faced Sith armies wielding both conventional weapons and terrible dark side powers. By around 1466 years before Yavin, the situation had become dire for the Republic. Sith forces had conquered virtually all territory outside the galactic core. The Republic, once spanning much of the known galaxy, was reduced to a fraction of its former size. A handful of core worlds remained under their control, including Coruscant, but everything else had fallen to various Sith lords and their armies. This period represents the most complete victory the Sith ever achieved in their long history. Not even the later Empire under Palpatine would control such a vast portion of the galaxy. Multiple Sith lords carved out personal kingdoms, ruling star systems, or even entire sectors according to their individual whims. The dark side reigned over much of the known universe during this dark age, with countless beings living under Sith domination. But even at the height of their success, the fatal flaw in Sith philosophy began to manifest. Pride, ambition, the lust for personal power above all else. These things had always driven the Sith, but they also made lasting unity impossible. Even as they conquered the galaxy, the seeds of their own destruction were already sprouting. Darth Ruin himself became an early victim of this internal strife. Historical accounts vary, but most agree he was eventually murdered by his own followers, who had grown tired of his leadership and coveted his power. This established a pattern that would repeat throughout the millennium of conflict. A powerful Sith would rise, unify various factions, achieve great conquests, then fall to betrayal from within. As the centuries passed, the new Sith Empire began to fragment. Internal feuds escalated into full-blown civil wars between rival Sith lords. Apprentices murdered masters, brothers turned against sisters, allies of convenience became bitter enemies once their common foes were defeated. No single Dark Lord could maintain unity for long. The very qualities that made the Sith formidable in battle made them incapable of sustaining an empire. Over decades, these internal conflicts grew increasingly destructive. Sith domains broke apart into competing fiefdoms. Planets unlucky enough to be caught between rival Sith factions suffered tremendously, sometimes bombed back to pre-industrial states by the crossfire of dark side warlords. Resources that could have been used to finish off the Republic were instead wasted on internecine power struggles. Meanwhile, the Republic slowly regrouped. Protected by their reduced but defensible borders in the core, they rebuilt their military and industrial capacity. The Jedi Order, though reduced in numbers, focused on quality over quantity, training knights specifically to combat Sith techniques. They learned from each defeat, adapting their strategies to the new reality they faced. By around 1050 years before Yavin, after nearly a millennium of continuous warfare, both sides had been dramatically weakened. The prolonged conflict had thinned the ranks of Jedi and Sith alike. Countless Force users had fallen in battle, taking their knowledge and potential with them. The galaxy was exhausted, with entire generations knowing nothing but war. It was at this crucial moment that a new figure emerged who would change the course of Sith history. His name was Skir Khan, a former Jedi who had fallen to the dark side but retained a clear strategic mind. Khan looked at the fractured state of the Sith and saw not just failure but opportunity. The endless infighting was destroying them from within, squandering advantages they had fought centuries to gain. Khan proposed a radical solution. The Sith needed to abandon their traditional power structure if they hoped to defeat the Republic once and for all. Instead of a single Dark Lord ruling over subordinates, constantly plotting to overthrow them, why not create a brotherhood where all Sith Lords were treated as equals, united by common purpose rather than hierarchy? This revolutionary idea became the Brotherhood of Darkness. Khan traveled from system to system, convincing warring Sith Lords to join his cause. His charisma and force of personality proved remarkably effective. Many Sith, tired of the endless civil wars, saw wisdom in his approach. Others simply recognized that continued infighting would eventually allow the Republic to reclaim everything they had conquered. To cement his new philosophy, Khan did something previously unthinkable in Sith culture. He crowned multiple Sith as Dark Lords within the Brotherhood, sharing the prestige that had always been reserved for a single master. This democratic approach to darkness was meant to quell rivalry by giving each powerful Sith a stake in their collective success rather than incentivizing them to betray one another. Under the Brotherhood's banner, the fragmented Sith forces began to reunify. With their internal conflicts temporarily set aside, they once again posed a serious threat to the Republic. Fresh offensives were launched against Republic worlds, catching many by surprise after decades of relative stalemate. The final phase of the thousand-year conflict had begun. The Republic and Jedi responded to this renewed Sith unity with their own reorganization. A Jedi Master named Lord Hoth gathered Jedi Knights and Republic forces into what he called the Army of Light, dedicated to finally ending the Sith threat once and for all. What followed was some of the largest-scale battles between Jedi and Sith forces ever recorded, with hundreds of Force users clashing directly in combat on worlds like Ruusan, Malrev, and Fasira. These confrontations dwarfed even the great Sith wars of ancient times in terms of the number of Force wielders involved. Lightsabers clashed by the dozens across battlefields as Jedi and Sith used their abilities on a scale rarely seen before or since. Forests were flattened by telekinetic storms, skies darkened with Force lightning. The very land itself would sometimes tear apart when particularly powerful combatants faced each other. As the campaign progressed, both sides suffered enormous casualties, but the tide slowly turned in favor of the Army of Light. Lord Hoth proved to be not just a powerful Jedi, but a brilliant tactician, methodically isolating and defeating Sith forces across multiple systems. The Brotherhood found itself increasingly on the defensive, losing ground they had held for centuries. Everything came to a head on a world called Ruusan. After 6 previous battles had been fought on this planet, with neither side gaining a permanent advantage, the 7th and final confrontation began. The remaining Sith forces under Lord Khan had been cornered by the Army of Light, cut off from reinforcements and supplies. Victory for the Jedi seemed all but assured, requiring only time and perseverance to complete. As defeat loomed, Khan grew increasingly desperate and unstable. The stress of holding together the Brotherhood while facing military disaster took its toll on his mental state. He began to consider extreme measures that would have been unthinkable earlier in the conflict. What Khan didn't realize was that his problems ran deeper than battlefield losses. Unknown to him, one of his own Brotherhood members had been systematically undermining their efforts from within. This was Darth Bane, a powerful and unusually thoughtful Sith Lord who had come to reject Khan's entire approach to Sith philosophy. Bane believed the Brotherhood of Darkness was fundamentally flawed. In his view, the Sith had survived throughout history precisely because they adhered to the principle that there should be only two, a master to embody power and an apprentice to crave it, no more, no less. The equality Khan preached diluted Sith power rather than concentrating it. It rewarded mediocrity and punished excellence. More pragmatically, Bane had come to believe that the Sith could never defeat the Republic and the Jedi through direct military confrontation. 1,000 years of war had proven this approach ultimately self-defeating. He envisioned a different path forward, one that required eliminating not just the Jedi, but all the current Sith as well, clearing the way for a purer lineage to emerge. With these goals in mind, Bane began manipulating events toward a conclusion few could have predicted. As the situation on Ruusan grew increasingly desperate, he reminded Khan of an ancient Sith superweapon called the Thought Bomb. This terrifying creation of Sith alchemy could destroy all Force-sensitive beings within its blast radius, trapping their souls in eternal torment. Khan seized on this option, believing it their last hope for victory. He began convincing the other Sith Lords that they could lure the Jedi into a trap and detonate the Thought Bomb, taking their enemies with them in a final act of vengeance. Bane encouraged this plan, knowing full well that it would be disastrously overkill and would claim the lives of all Sith present as well. In the year 1000 before the Battle of Yavin, the Brotherhood made its last stand. Khan and nearly 100 Sith Lords gathered in caves beneath Ruusan's surface. There, they combined their power to create the Thought Bomb, a swirling vortex of dark side energy. Lord Hoth, sensing the danger but unwilling to allow any Sith to escape, led a strike force of Jedi to confront them in their lair. The weapon detonated with catastrophic results. The Thought Bomb annihilated all Force-sensitive beings within its radius. Lord Khan, his entire Brotherhood, and Lord Hoth's Jedi strike force were killed instantly. More than just killed, their souls were trapped in Ruusan's depths, bound to the location in a state neither truly dead nor alive, a fate many would consider worse than simple death. As Darth Bane had planned, he alone among the Sith survived the cataclysm, having deliberately stayed far from the blast zone. The 7th Battle of Ruusan thus ended with every known Sith eradicated except Bane himself. From the Republic's perspective, the threat had finally been neutralized. The Jedi, though mourning the loss of Lord Hoth and his volunteers, believed they had at last achieved complete victory over their ancient enemy. The 1,000-year New Sith Wars had finally ended. The cost had been astronomical. Countless worlds had been devastated. Billions had died in the fighting. Knowledge and technology had been lost that would take centuries to rediscover. The Republic itself had been reduced to a fraction of its former territory and influence. In the aftermath, both the Republic and the Jedi Order underwent significant changes. The Republic implemented what became known as the Ruusan Reformation, a sweeping reorganization that redefined how the government functioned. Military forces were dramatically scaled down under the belief that the main threat to peace had been eliminated. Power was decentralized away from the Supreme Chancellor and given back to the Senate. The Republic Navy was dismantled, with defense responsibilities transferred to individual sectors. The Jedi Order also reformed itself. Without the constant pressure of warfare against the Sith, they refocused on their role as peacekeepers rather than soldiers. Training methods changed to emphasize more traditional Jedi values of contemplation and diplomacy over combat. The Order became more centralized, with all training taking place on Coruscant rather than at scattered academies throughout the galaxy. Crucially, both the Republic and the Jedi made one critical assumption. They believed the Sith were truly gone, eradicated completely in the cataclysm of Ruusan. This assumption would shape their policies and preparations for the next 1,000 years. It would also prove to be their greatest mistake, for Darth Bane had not perished as they believed. He had simply gone underground, taking with him a radical new vision for the future of the Sith. He understood that the Sith could never defeat the Jedi and the Republic through direct confrontation. A different approach was needed, one based on patience, secrecy, and the careful accumulation of power over generations. The new Sith Wars had ended, but the Sith themselves were not extinct. They were merely headed for the shadows where Bane believed they should have been all along. A new chapter in Sith history was about to begin, one that would ultimately prove more successful than 1,000 years of open warfare had ever been. As the dust settled on Ruusan, the galaxy breathed a collective sigh of relief. A millennium of darkness had finally ended. Reconstruction could begin. Peace seemed not just possible, but likely. Few suspected that the greatest victory of the Sith still lay in the future, patiently waiting for the right moment to emerge from the shadows Darth Bane was about to create. Sometimes victory requires defeat, sometimes survival demands death, and sometimes the path to ultimate power begins with accepting weakness. This paradox lies at the heart of the most radical transformation in Sith history, a change that would eventually bring them closer to galactic domination than 1,000 years of warfare ever could. In the smoking aftermath of Ruusan, as the Republic celebrated what they believed was the final extinction of the Sith, Darth Bane stood alone. The sole survivor of the Brotherhood of Darkness, he watched from hiding as the Jedi combed the battlefields, confirming that their ancient enemies had finally been destroyed. But Bane knew something they did not. The Sith's greatest weakness had always been the Sith themselves. Throughout their long history, the Sith had repeatedly come close to victory, only to be undone by their own ambition and infighting. Naga Sado's invasion failed partly due to Ludo Kresh's interference. Exar Kun's brotherhood collapsed after internal betrayals. Revan was struck down by his own apprentice Malak, and the new Sith Wars had devolved into centuries of Sith fighting Sith while the Republic gradually recovered. Bane saw a pattern where others saw only chaos. The problem wasn't bad luck or timing. It was inherent to how the Sith organized themselves. Multiple Sith Lords meant multiple agendas, multiple egos, and inevitable conflict. The darkest moments in Sith history came not from battles against the Jedi, but from the poison of too many Dark Lords competing for supremacy. Around 1,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, Darth Bane made a decision that would forever change the course of galactic history. He instituted what became known as the Rule of Two. From that moment forward, there would only ever be two Sith at any given time, a master to embody power and an apprentice to crave it. This approach solved multiple problems at once. By limiting their numbers, the Sith could operate in complete secrecy, invisible to Jedi detection. They could work behind the scenes, accumulating influence while their enemies believed them extinct. And perhaps most importantly, they could distill their power through a process of continuous refinement. Bane understood that with only one apprentice, a Sith Master would invest everything in training their successor. The apprentice would learn all their master knew, then add new knowledge of their own. Eventually, when the apprentice had grown powerful enough, they would challenge and hopefully kill their master, taking their place and selecting a new apprentice to continue the cycle. This brutal process ensured that each generation of Sith would theoretically be stronger than the last. Weakness would be purged, knowledge would accumulate, and patience would replace the reckless aggression that had repeatedly doomed Sith ambitions throughout history. To begin this new lineage, Bane took on a young apprentice named Darth Zana. Found amid the chaos of Ruusan, Zana showed tremendous potential in the dark side. Bane trained her relentlessly, teaching her not just Sith techniques, but a whole new philosophy. The Sith would no longer seek to defeat the Republic through open warfare. Their victory would come through manipulation, infiltration, and the careful corruption of the Republic from within. In the eyes of the galaxy, the Sith Order died at Ruusan. The Jedi declared victory and moved on. The Republic restructured itself for an era of peace. But in reality, the Sith were reborn underground as Bane's Sith, more focused and dangerous than ever before, playing a long game measured not in years, but in centuries. For the next millennium, the Sith remained hidden, working in secrecy to undermine the Republic and the Jedi. Each Sith Master would train a single apprentice in isolation from the galaxy at large. When the apprentice grew strong enough, they would challenge their master. If victorious, they would take their place as the new Sith Master and eventually find an apprentice of their own, continuing the unbroken line. Around 980 years before the Battle of Yavin, Darth Zana proved the Rule of Two worked exactly as Bane intended. After years of training and preparation, she challenged her master and defeated him in combat. Some historical records suggest she killed Bane, while others hint at a more complex fate where Bane attempted to transfer his consciousness into her body. Whatever the exact details, Zana emerged as the new Sith Master and took her own apprentice, continuing the chain. After Zana came Darth Cognus, sometimes called the Huntress. A non-human Sith with exceptional tracking abilities, Cognus had served as Zana's apprentice before claiming the mantle of Master. She in turn trained a succession of apprentices, furthering Bane's vision for the Sith evolution. Much of what happened during these centuries remains hidden from historical records. The Sith operated in extreme secrecy, leaving few traces for later generations to discover. This was by design. Bane had taught that anonymity was their greatest weapon. The Jedi could not fight an enemy they did not know existed. The Republic could not defend against a threat they had long considered extinct. Yet, despite this secrecy, fragments of information about certain Sith lords from this period have survived. Around 500 years before the Battle of Yavin, a three-eyed mutant Sith named Darth Millennial trained under Darth Cognos. Millennial grew dissatisfied with the rule of two, believing it too restrictive. He broke from his master and founded a splinter group called the Prophets of the Dark Side on Dromund Kaas, the ancient Sith world. These prophets focused on divination through the dark side, seeking to foresee the future rather than actively shape it through conquest. While they preserved some Sith knowledge, they represented a deviation from Bane's pure lineage, a reminder that even the strictly controlled rule of two could not prevent occasional heresies. Another notable figure from this era was Darth Gravid, who reigned approximately 500 years before Yavin. Gravid fell victim to a dangerous delusion, believing he could combine aspects of Jedi and Sith philosophy to create a more balanced approach to the Force. This madness led him to nearly destroy the collected Sith archives and artifacts that had been carefully preserved since Bane's time. His apprentice, Darth Geen, was forced to stop him before he could complete this destruction. She killed her master, but not before he had managed to eliminate many precious Sith texts and relics. This incident represented one of the greatest setbacks during the Rule of Two era, a reminder that the dark side could sometimes consume its practitioners in unexpected ways. Not all Sith from this period followed the traditional path of violence and conquest. Perhaps the most unusual case was Darth Vectivus. Unlike most Sith lords, Vectivus began his career as a business administrator at a mining facility. After discovering his Force sensitivity and finding Sith teachings, he developed his powers while maintaining his business career. What made Vectivus remarkable was that he apparently lived a relatively benign existence. He accumulated wealth through legitimate business rather than criminal enterprise. He maintained friendships and family relationships, and when his time came, he died peacefully, surrounded by loved ones. This anomaly suggests that even within the strict confines of the Rule of Two, individual Sith lords could interpret the path in dramatically different ways. By design, most Sith during this millennium avoided drawing attention to themselves. They amassed influence in politics, finance, and the criminal underworld, creating networks of unwitting agents who served Sith interests without ever knowing the true nature of their masters. All the while, the Jedi Order grew increasingly complacent, convinced that their ancient enemies had been extinct for centuries. As the final century before the Battle of Yavin approached, the Banite Sith began moving toward the culmination of their thousand-year plan. The lineage had reached Darth Tenebrous, a Bith Sith Lord with extraordinary analytical abilities. Tenebrous trained an apprentice named Darth Plagueis, a member of the Mun species known for their financial acumen. Plagueis proved to be one of the most significant Sith Lords in the entire lineage. Where many of his predecessors had focused on traditional dark side techniques, Plagueis was fascinated by the fundamental nature of the Force itself. He conducted extensive experiments on living beings, seeking to understand and manipulate midi-chlorians, the microscopic life forms that connected living beings to the Force. These experiments had an ambitious goal. Plagueis sought nothing less than the secret to creating life itself and achieving a form of immortality through the Force. His research took him into areas of the dark side that few had ever explored, combining scientific method with Sith sorcery in ways that broke new ground in dark side knowledge. While pursuing these esoteric goals, Plagueis never lost sight of the political dimension of the Sith Grand Plan. He established himself as a power within the intergalactic banking clan, one of the galaxy's most influential financial institutions. From this position, he could manipulate economic forces throughout the Republic, creating crises and opportunities that served Sith purposes without revealing his true nature. Around 100 years before Yavin, Plagueis began searching for an apprentice worthy of the final phase of the Grand Plan. The Sith were approaching the culmination of Bane's vision, the point at which they would finally emerge from the shadows and reclaim control of the galaxy. This critical moment demanded an apprentice of exceptional ability and ruthlessness. Plagueis found what he was looking for on the mid-rim world of Naboo. There, a young noble named Sheev Palpatine showed tremendous untapped potential in the Force, combined with a natural talent for manipulation and a hunger for power that set him apart from his peers. Plagueis began carefully cultivating this potential, gradually introducing Palpatine to Sith teachings while assessing his worthiness. The test came around 65 years before Yavin. Under Plagueis's guidance, Palpatine murdered his entire family, fully embracing the dark side and proving his commitment to the Sith path. Satisfied with this display, Plagueis formally took Palpatine as his apprentice, giving him the Sith name Darth Sidious. For decades, Plagueis and Sidious worked in tandem, advancing different aspects of the Grand Plan. Plagueis continued his scientific research and expanded his influence over galactic finance. Meanwhile, Sidious focused on the political arena, beginning a career in the Republic Senate that would eventually take him to its highest office. The partnership between master and apprentice was unusually productive by Sith standards. Where most Sith apprentices immediately began plotting to overthrow their masters, Sidious showed patience, recognizing the value of Plagueis's knowledge and connections. Their complementary skills allowed them to advance the Sith agenda on multiple fronts simultaneously. Plagueis shared everything he knew with his apprentice, including his research into midi-chlorian manipulation and potential immortality. Some speculate that he may have even succeeded in using the Force to influence midi-chlorians to create life, potentially explaining the unusual circumstances of Anakin Skywalker's birth years later, though this connection remains controversial among historians. As time passed, Sidious developed his own plans and initiatives, some of which he kept hidden from his master. In secret, he identified and began training a Zabrak child named Maul in the ways of the dark side. Though not officially his apprentice while Plagueis lived, Maul was raised from infancy to be a living weapon, a Sith assassin who could eliminate obstacles to the Grand Plan. Eventually, as in all Sith partnerships, Sidious's ambition outgrew his loyalty to Plagueis. By 32 years before the Battle of Yavin, Sidious had risen to become Senator of Naboo and was positioning himself for greater political power. The Sith Grand Plan was approaching its final phase, with key pieces falling into place after centuries of preparation. On what should have been the eve of their shared triumph, Sidious made his move. Finding his master in a vulnerable state, intoxicated and asleep after celebrating their progress, Sidious unleashed Force lightning against Plagueis, killing him in his sleep. It was a quintessential Sith betrayal, though lacking the traditional confrontation that usually marked the transition of power. With Plagueis eliminated, Darth Sidious became the sole Sith Master, the culmination of Bane's lineage after 1,000 years of careful development. He now formally took Maul as his true apprentice, though the Zabrak would prove to be merely the first of several apprentices Sidious would train during his reign. The rule of two had served its purpose perfectly. From Bane to Sidious, the Sith had evolved into something far more dangerous than the warring hordes that had directly challenged the Republic in previous eras. They had become patient, sophisticated manipulators capable of working within the very institutions they sought to destroy. As Darth Sidious, now serving as Senator Palpatine of Naboo, prepared to unleash the first public phase of his plans, the Jedi remained completely unaware of the threat growing in their midst. The Sith had indeed died at Ruusan, just as history recorded, but what had replaced them was something far more dangerous than anything the Jedi had faced before. The 1,000-year game established by Darth Bane was approaching its endgame. The Sith had evolved from warriors into shadows, from conquerors into conspirators. And now, as the final pieces moved into position, they prepared to step back into the light, not as the enemies of the Republic, but as its saviors. The greatest deception in galactic history was about to unfold, a testament to the power of Bane's vision and the effectiveness of the path he had created. The rule of two had transformed the Sith from a failing order of dark side warriors into the architects of the Republic's destruction, and no one, not even the wisest of the Jedi, saw it coming. The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he did not exist. For 1,000 years, the Sith had hidden in shadows, building toward the moment when they would finally reveal themselves. But when that revelation came, it was not as conquerors, it was as saviors. In the year 32 before the Battle of Yavin, the 1,000-year game established by Darth Bane entered its final phase. After centuries of patient manipulation, careful planning, and strategic positioning, the Sith were ready to step back into the light of galactic history. Darth Sidious, operating publicly as the unassuming Senator Palpatine from Naboo, was prepared to execute the endgame of the grand plan. Unlike his Sith predecessors who had attempted to conquer the Republic through military might, Sidious understood that true victory would come from within. The Republic would not be destroyed by outside forces, but would transform itself willingly into the very empire the Sith had always desired. The key was creating the right crisis, one that would make citizens beg for the security that only a strong central authority could provide. The first step in this elaborate scheme was the Naboo crisis. Sidious manipulated the Trade Federation, a powerful commerce guild with its own military capabilities, into blockading his home planet of Naboo. He played on the Trade Federation's greed and fear, convincing them that an illegal blockade would force concessions from the Republic that would benefit their business interests. As the mysterious Sith Lord Darth Sidious, cloaked and speaking through hologram transmissions, he pushed the Trade Federation leadership into increasingly aggressive actions. Meanwhile, as Senator Palpatine, he presented himself as the concerned representative of a world in crisis, helpless to save his people through normal political channels. When the Trade Federation escalated from blockade to full invasion, occupying Naboo with their droid army, Sidious had achieved exactly the situation he wanted. The Republic appeared weak and indecisive, unable to protect its member worlds. The current Supreme Chancellor, Finis Valorum, found himself hamstrung by bureaucracy and special interests, unable to take decisive action to help Naboo. This crisis provided the perfect opportunity for Senator Palpatine to push for a vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valorum, positioning himself as a candidate for the galaxy's highest office. The sympathy vote for the senator whose homeworld was suffering under invasion made him a natural choice for many Republic senators. While this political drama unfolded in the Senate, Sidious sent his apprentice, Darth Maul, to deal with an unexpected complication. The Jedi Order had dispatched two knights, Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi, to negotiate with the Trade Federation and protect Naboo's young queen Amidala. These Jedi represented the first real threat to Sidious's plans. Maul's confrontation with the Jedi on Naboo marked the Sith Order's first public appearance in a millennium. After tracking the Jedi and the Queen to Tatooine and then back to Naboo, Maul engaged them in the palace at Theed, the capital city. The resulting lightsaber duel was fierce. Maul managed to kill Qui-Gon Jinn, striking a psychological blow against the Jedi Order. But in his moment of triumph, Maul was himself defeated, cut in half by Obi-Wan Kenobi, and sent plummeting down a reactor shaft, presumed dead. Despite this setback, the Naboo crisis resolved exactly as Sidious had hoped. While the people of Naboo ultimately repelled the Trade Federation invasion, thanks to the efforts of Queen Amidala and an unlikely alliance with the planet's native Gungan species, the political outcome favored Sidious. The sympathy and admiration generated by Naboo's plight propelled Palpatine into the office of Supreme Chancellor of the Republic. From the Sith perspective, this victory was monumental. After 1,000 years of preparation, a Sith Lord now held the highest office in the Republic. Yet the Jedi remained largely unaware of the threat. Though they recognized that Maul was a Sith, they had no idea that the master orchestrating events was now leading the very government they were sworn to protect. The loss of Darth Maul, while frustrating, did not significantly disrupt Sidious's plans. The rule of two demanded a new apprentice, and Sidious already had his eye on a promising candidate. Count Dooku, a former Jedi Master with impressive lineage and political connections, had grown disillusioned with both the Republic and the Jedi Order. Dooku had legitimate grievances. He saw corruption spreading through the Republic Senate and believed the Jedi had become too subservient to politicians. The death of Qui-Gon Jinn, who had been his Padawan, deepened his disenchantment. Shortly after the Naboo crisis, Dooku formally left the Jedi Order, returning to his family estate on Sereno and reclaiming his hereditary title of Count. What few knew was that Dooku had already been in contact with Sidious even before Plagueis' death. The exact timeline remains murky, but sometime between 32 and 24 years before Yavin, Sidious formally turned Dooku to the dark side, bestowing upon him the Sith name Darth Tyrannus. Tyrannus proved to be an extraordinarily useful apprentice for the next phase of Sidious's plan. As a former Jedi Master from a wealthy aristocratic background, Dooku had both the Force training and political connections necessary to build the next piece of Sidious's grand design. A separatist movement that would tear the Republic apart from within. Working both openly as Count Dooku and secretly as Darth Tyrannus, he began gathering discontented star systems and powerful corporate factions under his influence. He spoke eloquently about the corruption of the Republic and the need for a new galactic order. Many listened, particularly on rim worlds that had long felt neglected by the core-focused Republic. Simultaneously, Dooku helped Sidious set another crucial element in motion. They needed an army for the Republic, one that would be under Sidious's ultimate control but appear to be a legitimate response to the growing Separatist threat. Dooku secretly worked with a Jedi Master named Sidious, who had foreseen a coming conflict and believed the Republic needed military protection. When Sidious commissioned the Kaminoan cloners to create an army for the Republic, Dooku ensured the project continued after eliminating Sidious himself. He personally recruited the bounty hunter Jango Fett to serve as the genetic template for the clone army. Most importantly, he made sure that the clones were implanted with a secret behavioral modification protocol. Order 66 would remain dormant until activated, at which point the clones would turn on their Jedi generals without question. For the next decade, these twin preparations advanced in parallel. The clone army grew in secret on the remote world of Kamino, while Dooku's separatist movement gained strength throughout the galaxy. All the while, Supreme Chancellor Palpatine consolidated his political power, presenting himself as a reluctant leader, accepting ever greater emergency powers only out of necessity to address the growing crisis. By 22 years before the Battle of Yavin, the pieces were in place for the next major phase of Sidious's plan. The Confederacy of Independent Systems, as Dooku's Separatist Alliance now called itself, formally seceded from the Republic. They backed this political move with a massive droid army supplied by corporate allies like the Trade Federation, the Techno Union, and the Banking Clan. The discovery of this army, along with the revelation of the clone army on Kamino, created exactly the crisis point Sidious had engineered. The Republic faced an existential threat, but had no military force ready to counter it. In a carefully orchestrated series of events, emergency powers were granted to Chancellor Palpatine, allowing him to formally commission the clone army without Senate approval. Thus began the Clone Wars, a galaxy-spanning conflict that was, in reality, entirely orchestrated by the Sith. As Chancellor Palpatine, Sidious commanded the Republic's grand army of clone troopers. As the hidden Darth Sidious, he directed his apprentice Count Dooku to lead the separatist forces of battle droids. Both sides of the war answered to the same master, though only a handful of individuals in the galaxy knew this terrible truth. The Clone Wars served multiple Sith goals simultaneously. First, it weakened the Jedi Order by transforming them from peacekeepers into generals. Jedi were spread thin across battlefronts throughout the galaxy, fighting and dying in a war engineered by their ancient enemy. Second, it militarized the Republic, creating the infrastructure and mentality that would accept an eventual empire. Finally, it positioned Palpatine as the indispensable leader, guiding the Republic through its darkest hour, justifying ever-increasing emergency powers. For 3 years, Sidious played both sides of the conflict with masterful precision. Republic victories and separatist advances were both part of his plan, carefully balanced to extend the conflict while moving toward his ultimate goal. The war needed to last long enough to achieve its purpose, but end at precisely the right moment to cement Sidious's power. During this period, Sidious demonstrated his ruthless commitment to the rule of two, while also pragmatically exploring potential alternatives. He encouraged Count Dooku to train the assassin Asajj Ventress in dark side techniques, then later ordered Dooku to eliminate her when she grew too powerful. Similarly, he briefly took interest in Savage Opress, the brother of Darth Maul, as a potential dark side agent. These were not true apprentices in the Sith tradition, but tools to be used and discarded as needed. In the final year of the war, 19 years before the Battle of Yavin, an unexpected complication arose. Darth Maul, who had been presumed dead since the Battle of Naboo, resurfaced. Through sheer hatred and will to survive, augmented by dark side energy, Maul had sustained himself after his devastating injury. With his lower body replaced by mechanical legs, the former Sith apprentice began building his own power base, creating a criminal organization called the Shadow Collective, and even briefly taking control of the planet Mandalore. This rogue Sith represented a potential threat to Sidious's carefully laid plans. Maul knew too much about Sidious's identity and methods, and his very existence violated the rule of two. Sidious could not allow this wild card to disrupt the endgame now approaching. The Dark Lord personally intervened, traveling to Mandalore to confront his former apprentice. In a display of his tremendous power, Sidious defeated both Maul and his brother Savage Opress in lightsaber combat. He killed Opress and captured Maul, imprisoning him for later use. Though Maul would eventually escape, he never again posed a serious threat to Sidious's plans and ultimately met his end in exile, killed by Obi-Wan Kenobi years later. With this distraction eliminated, Sidious focused on the final moves in his grand strategy. The Clone Wars had achieved their purpose. The Jedi were exhausted and diminished. The Republic had transformed into a military state. The populace was desperate for security and stability, and Palpatine's emergency powers had grown to near dictatorial levels. It was time to spring the final trap. Sidious engineered a situation where he himself appeared to be kidnapped by the separatist military leader, General Grievous. This crisis brought two key Jedi into play. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker, heroes of the Republic War effort, were sent to rescue the Chancellor in a daring raid on Grievous's flagship over Coruscant. During this rescue mission, Sidious manipulated Anakin into killing Count Dooku in cold blood. This served two purposes. It eliminated Tyrannus, whose usefulness had come to an end, and it pushed Anakin further down the path to the dark side. For Sidious had identified Anakin Skywalker, a uniquely powerful Force user with a troubled spirit, as his next apprentice long before. In the aftermath of this mission, Sidious accelerated his grooming of Anakin. He positioned himself as a mentor and father figure to the young Jedi, offering understanding and acceptance where the Jedi Council provided only suspicion and restriction. He played on Anakin's fears, particularly his secret marriage to Senator Padme Amidala and his nightmares about her potential death in childbirth. Simultaneously, Sidious lured the remaining separatist leadership to the volcanic planet Mustafar, ensuring they would be in position for their eventual elimination. With Dooku dead and the separatist leadership isolated, all pieces were in place for the endgame. The final act began when Sidious revealed his true identity as a Sith Lord to Anakin Skywalker. This calculated risk forced events to their conclusion. Anakin reported this revelation to Jedi Master Mace Windu, who gathered a team of Jedi Masters to arrest the Chancellor. The confrontation in Palpatine's office was the moment everything had built toward. Sidious killed 3 Jedi Masters in seconds, then engaged Windu in a lightsaber duel that pushed both to their limits. When Anakin arrived, Sidious appeared to be defeated, cowering before Windu's blade. In reality, this was his masterstroke of manipulation. Faced with a choice between saving Sidious, who claimed to have the power to prevent Padme's death, or allowing Windu to execute him, Anakin made his fateful decision. He intervened, allowing Sidious to kill Windu. In that moment, Anakin Skywalker crossed a line from which there was no return. He knelt before Darth Sidious and pledged himself to the Sith, receiving the name Darth Vader. With his new apprentice at his side, Sidious enacted the final phase of the grand plan. He activated Order 66, causing clone troopers throughout the galaxy to turn on their Jedi generals without warning. Thousands of Jedi were killed in minutes, caught completely unprepared for betrayal from troops they had fought alongside for years. While the purge unfolded across the stars, Darth Vader led a direct assault on the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. With a legion of clone troopers, he methodically slaughtered everyone inside, including the younglings training to become Jedi. The heart of the Jedi Order was extinguished in a single night of violence. Simultaneously, Palpatine issued orders branding the Jedi as traitors who had attempted to overthrow the legitimate government of the Republic. The exhausted and frightened populace, already conditioned by years of war propaganda, largely accepted this narrative without question. With the Jedi effectively eliminated, Palpatine moved to consolidate absolute power. He called a special session of the Senate and, still bearing the injuries from his confrontation with Windu, announced the reorganization of the Republic into the First Galactic Empire, with himself as Emperor. The Senate responded with thunderous applause, willingly surrendering democracy in exchange for the promise of security and stability. Vader was dispatched to Mustafar to eliminate the Separatist leadership, cutting off any loose ends that might reveal the truth behind the Clone Wars. This mission coincided with a fateful confrontation with Obi-Wan Kenobi that left Vader grievously injured but still alive, necessitating the iconic life support armor he would wear for the rest of his life. The Sith Grand Plan was complete. After more than 1,000 years of patient plotting since Darth Bane, the Sith had achieved what multiple armies and empires had failed to accomplish. They ruled the galaxy openly, with Darth Sidious as Emperor and Darth Vader as his enforcer. The Jedi Order was destroyed, with only a handful of survivors scattered and in hiding. The Republic had willingly transformed itself into an empire, and perhaps most incredibly, the population had cheered this transition, never realizing that they had handed absolute power to the very enemy the Republic had been founded to oppose. This moment represented the ultimate triumph of the Sith. Darth Sidious and Darth Vader now reigned as master and apprentice, the sole two Sith in existence, exactly as Bane had envisioned. They had achieved the vengeance the Sith had sought for millennia. All that remained was to ensure their rule would last forever. All empires fall. This universal truth has played out across countless civilizations throughout galactic history. But for the Sith, their greatest triumph would also lead to their ultimate downfall. And in perhaps the most ironic twist of all, their destruction would come not from their ancient Jedi enemies, but from within their own ranks. With the formation of the Galactic Empire in 19 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Sith had achieved what had seemed impossible for millennia. Darth Sidious, now publicly ruling as Emperor Palpatine, stood at the pinnacle of galactic power, with his apprentice Darth Vader at his side. The Jedi Order lay in ruins. The Republic had transformed into an authoritarian regime with the willing support of its citizens. For the first time since the ancient Sith Empire, they controlled not just the galactic government and military, but even the narrative of history itself. The story of the Jedi attempt to overthrow the Republic became official truth, taught to school children across thousands of worlds. The dark side ruled unopposed. Emperor Palpatine moved quickly to cement his control. Though the Imperial Senate initially remained as a symbolic body, real power was increasingly centralized under Palpatine's direct authority. Regional governors called Moffs administered territories with military backing, bypassing traditional democratic processes. Fear became the primary tool of governance, with examples made of worlds that showed even slight resistance to the new order. The military expansion that had begun during the Clone Wars accelerated under Imperial rule. Star destroyers became symbols of Imperial might, capable of subjugating entire systems with their mere presence. Stormtroopers, the evolved successors to the clone army, enforced Imperial will on countless worlds. Behind everything stood the technological terror of the Death Star project, a battle station with the power to destroy entire planets. The ultimate expression of the Sith philosophy of rule through fear. As the Empire consolidated its grip, the Great Jedi Purge continued. The initial massacre of Order 66 had eliminated thousands of Jedi across the galaxy, but some had survived the initial onslaught. Hunting down these remaining Jedi became one of the Empire's top priorities. Darth Vader personally led many of these missions, driven by a particular hatred for the Order he had once served. To aid in this hunt, the Empire created specialized agents trained in dark side techniques. The Inquisitorius, a group of fallen Jedi and Force-sensitive individuals, answered directly to Vader. Each Inquisitor took a numerical title rather than a name, symbolizing their subservience to the Sith hierarchy. The Grand Inquisitor, a former Jedi Temple Guard, led their efforts to track down surviving Jedi and Force-sensitive children who might rebuild the Order. Other Imperial agents with varying degrees of dark side training included the Emperor's hands, elite assassins who believed themselves to be Palpatine's unique servant, unaware that the Emperor maintained several such agents simultaneously. Through these proxies, the Sith extended their reach without violating the rule of two that had served them so well. The Purge had largely succeeded. Very few Jedi remained alive or active in the galaxy. Those who survived had gone deeply into hiding, severing their connection to the Force or retreating to remote worlds far from Imperial eyes. The Jedi Order, which had stood as guardians of peace and justice for thousands of years, had been reduced to little more than legend in less than 2 decades. Beyond hunting Jedi, Sidious pursued another agenda central to Sith ambition. He sought out repositories of both Jedi and Sith knowledge, securing holocrons and ancient artifacts from sacred sites across the galaxy. Places of Force significance like Ossus, with its ancient Jedi library, and the Jedi Temple on Lothal, with its unique gateway, came under Imperial control. Some sites were stripped of their artifacts, others destroyed completely, all to eliminate potential threats and preserve dark side secrets for Sidious alone. The relationship between Sidious and Vader during this period followed classic Sith tradition, with master and apprentice constantly jockeying for position. Sidious had achieved his ultimate goal of galactic domination, but the apprentice he had groomed to rule alongside him had been severely diminished by his injuries on Mustafar. The suited and cybernetically rebuilt Vader remained tremendously powerful, but not the unstoppable force Sidious had envisioned when corrupting Anakin Skywalker. To ensure Vader remained both strong and controlled, Sidious employed the time-tested Sith method of keeping his apprentice's anger and hatred burning. He designed Vader's life support suit to be uncomfortable and limiting, a constant reminder of his failures. He assigned missions that forced Vader to confront his past, and most insidiously, he occasionally tested potential replacements. Vader, for his part, served with apparent loyalty while harboring the traditional Sith ambition to eventually overthrow his master. Crippled physically but still immensely powerful in the Force, Vader became the face of Imperial terror throughout the galaxy. His mere arrival on a world was enough to ensure compliance through fear. Behind his masked exterior, however, Anakin Skywalker remained buried beneath layers of hatred and pain, not truly gone, but suppressed by the dark side persona of Darth Vader. Despite the Sith's seemingly unshakable grip on power, the seeds of resistance took root throughout the galaxy. What began as isolated cells of rebellion gradually coalesced into a more organized opposition. Former separatists, disillusioned Imperial officers, idealistic senators, and ordinary citizens pushed beyond their breaking point. All found common cause in opposing Palpatine's tyranny. By around 2 years before the Battle of Yavin, these disparate resistance groups had formally united as the Alliance to Restore the Republic, commonly known as the Rebel Alliance. For the Sith, these rebels represented an irritating nuisance to be crushed. The Empire responded with escalating brutality, destroying entire cities or even worlds suspected of harboring rebel sympathies. The most extreme example came with the destruction of Alderaan in Zero BBY. When Princess Leia Organa, a leader in the rebellion and secretly Vader's own daughter, refused to divulge the location of a hidden rebel base, Grand Moff Tarkin ordered Alderaan destroyed by the Death Star as a demonstration of Imperial power. 2 billion lives were extinguished in an instant. This act of Sith-like terror, intended to crush resistance through fear, instead galvanized support for the rebellion across thousands of worlds. Unknown to both Sidious and Vader, the children of Anakin Skywalker had survived their father's fall and their mother's death. Hidden at birth to protect them from the Sith, Luke Skywalker and Leia Organa had grown up separately, unaware of their relationship to each other or to Darth Vader. As adults, both became central figures in the fight against the Empire. Leia as a political leader within the Alliance, and Luke as potentially the first of a new generation of Jedi. The rebellion scored its first major victory shortly after the destruction of Alderaan. In the Battle of Yavin, a small force of rebel fighters managed to exploit a weakness in the Death Star's design, resulting in the complete destruction of the battle station. The pilot who fired the critical shot was Luke Skywalker, guided by the Force and the spirit of his mentor Obi-Wan Kenobi, who had sacrificed himself in a confrontation with Vader aboard the Death Star. This unexpected defeat enraged Emperor Palpatine and became a turning point in the Galactic Civil War. The Empire, previously seen as invincible, had been proven vulnerable. For the first time, hope spread that the Sith's rule might not be eternal after all. Sidious responded by granting the military even greater resources and authority, including the eventual dissolution of the Imperial Senate, removing the last vestige of Republic governance. In the aftermath of the Battle of Yavin, Darth Vader became obsessed with finding the Force-sensitive pilot who had destroyed the Death Star. When he eventually discovered the name Skywalker, he realized the son he believed had died with Padme had actually survived. This knowledge changed everything for Vader. He now saw a potential ally in overthrowing Sidious and claiming the Empire for himself, with his son at his side. Over the next several years, the conflict between Empire and Rebellion intensified. The rebels, though scoring occasional victories, were constantly on the run from Imperial forces. The Empire began construction on a second, more powerful Death Star, while hunting the Alliance leadership across the galaxy. Throughout this period, Luke Skywalker continued developing his Force abilities, eventually training briefly with Jedi Master Yoda, one of the few survivors of Order 66 who had been living in exile on the remote world of Dagobah. Events came to a head in 4 years after the Battle of Yavin. After confirming that Luke was indeed his son, Vader confronted him on the cloud mining colony of Bespin. In their lightsaber duel, Vader demonstrated his superior skill and power, severing Luke's hand before revealing the truth of their relationship. Rather than join his father in embracing the dark side, Luke chose to fall to what seemed certain death, only to be rescued by his friends. This rejection affected Vader more deeply than anyone realized. For the first time since his fall to the dark side, doubts began to creep into the mind of the Sith Lord. Though he continued to serve Emperor Palpatine outwardly, the conflict within him between Darth Vader and the suppressed identity of Anakin Skywalker intensified. The final confrontation between Sith and Jedi came at the Battle of Endor. Emperor Palpatine, confident in his foresight and power, laid a trap for the Rebel Alliance. He deliberately allowed intelligence about the second Death Star's location and shield vulnerabilities to reach Rebel spies. When the Alliance fleet arrived to destroy the supposedly vulnerable station, they found a fully operational battle station and the Imperial fleet waiting in ambush. But Palpatine's overconfidence extended beyond military strategy. He had also orchestrated a confrontation between Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, and himself aboard the Death Star, believing he could turn Luke to the dark side as he had turned his father. Sidious invited the young Jedi into his throne room overlooking the space battle. What followed was not just a physical conflict, but a spiritual one that would determine the fate of the galaxy. Sidious attempted to seduce Luke with demonstrations of power and promises of saving his friends. When Luke resisted these temptations, Palpatine forced him into a lightsaber duel with Vader, hoping Luke's anger would drive him to the dark side. For a moment, it seemed Sidious's plan might succeed. When Vader discovered through probing Luke's mind that he had a twin sister and threatened to turn her to the dark side instead, Luke's rage exploded. He attacked Vader with fury, eventually overpowering his father and cutting off his mechanical hand. But standing over the defeated Sith Lord, seeing his own cybernetic hand so similar to his father's, Luke made the choice that would change everything. He threw aside his lightsaber and refused to kill his father, declaring himself a Jedi like Anakin had once been. Enraged by this defiance, Emperor Palpatine unleashed the full power of the dark side against Luke in the form of Force lightning, intending to torture him to death for his refusal. As Luke suffered under this assault, something stirred within Darth Vader. Watching his son being slowly killed while calling for his father's help finally broke through the dark side prison that had held Anakin Skywalker captive for more than 2 decades. In the defining moment of his life, Vader turned against his Sith master. He lifted the Emperor and threw him down a reactor shaft, mortally wounding the Sith Lord who had orchestrated so much suffering throughout the galaxy. In doing so, Vader sustained fatal damage from the Emperor's lightning, his life support systems failing beyond repair. Emperor Palpatine perished when the Death Star exploded following the successful rebel attack on its reactor. Darth Vader died moments later in his son's arms, but not as the Dark Lord of the Sith. He died as Anakin Skywalker, redeemed by his son's love and his own final choice to turn away from the dark side. This moment, in 4 years after the Battle of Yavin, marked the end of Darth Bane's lineage of the Sith. Both reigning Sith Lords were gone, and no successors remained who had been trained in the true Sith tradition. The order that had endured for nearly 7,000 years since the days of Arjunta Pal appeared to be extinct, fulfilling an ancient prophecy that the Chosen One would bring balance to the Force. The irony of the Sith's destruction was that it came not from defeat in battle by their Jedi enemies, but through their own inherent flaws. The same selfish philosophy that had given them strength ultimately proved their undoing. The Sith Code taught that strength came through passion and the pursuit of personal power above all else. But in the end, it was selfless love, the very antithesis of Sith teaching, that destroyed them. Anakin Skywalker's return to the light side represented a complete rejection of everything the Sith stood for. His final act was not to seize power for himself, as Sith philosophy would dictate, but to sacrifice his life to save another. In that moment, 7,000 years of Sith history came to an end, not with the thunder of conquest, but with a father's love for his son. Though the timeline of this documentary ends with the presumed extinction of the Sith at Endor, their legacy would echo through the galaxy for decades to come. Palpatine had contingency plans that included potential clones and cultists hidden in the unknown regions. Dark side devotees who were not true Sith continued to emerge periodically to threaten the new galactic order. The philosophical questions the Sith raised about power, passion, and freedom remained relevant long after their apparent destruction. But as of 4 years after the Battle of Yavin, the Sith's millennia-long saga of rise, fall, and return appeared to conclude. The cycle that had begun with the first Dark Jedi exiles discovering Korriban ended with Anakin Skywalker's redemption. The age of the Sith, with all its darkness and terror, gave way to a new era of hope.